from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
Well, all right. Welcome, everyone, to episode 41 of the CoCo Crew Podcast. I'm, of course, John, and I'm here with Mike Rowan. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how's everybody?
Good. Hi, Boise. How you doing?
Hey, doing great. Good to be here.
And then Mr. Ron Klein. How are you doing, Ron?
Good. Hey, everybody.
And Neil is bumbling around somewhere, but I think he'll be on in a little bit, but he's not with us right at the moment. Anyway, so the year marches on. It's late October, not quite time for Halloween, but just around the corner. Then, of course, will be Tandy Assembly. Almost here. Everyone excited? Very excited.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yep.
And of course, Tandy Assembly beyond that, CoCo Fest is another 6 months away. So taking off time, getting exciting things happening. Is everyone working on something cool? Anyone doing any cool projects or making the last minute preparations for Tandy Assembly?
Just getting ready for Tandy Assembly right now. Pretty excited. I'll be bringing my wife and her mom down again. They want to do a little bit of sightseeing down there, so driving duties won't be so bad.
That should be fun. How about you, Mike? You imagine you're a little busy with Tandy Assembly.
Yeah, getting ready for Tandy Assembly. Getting Tandy Assembly ready, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're good to go. Things are close, and it's going to be. We really like the new venue. It's going to be a great event.
Cool, very exciting. Boise, you up to no good these days?
Yeah, actually, I've been doing a lot of pulling in old messages from the CoCo list and FidoNet and Delphi and CompuServe for a little project that I'm working on.
Cool. Sounds mysterious and cool. Can't wait to see how that turns out. Myself, I kind of had a weird few weeks with a little bit of a secret project at work. It's a little unusual to have secret projects where I work, but they happen once in a while. Unfortunately, between that and then looking at Retro Challenge, taking up most of my goofing off time or or whatever. Fortunately, Retro Challenge results are now posted for the September event. So I won't have to look at Retro Challenge much until March, hopefully. So hopefully that lets me get back into something more CoCo related. Other than that, anybody pick up any new items lately? Purchases off of eBay or inheritances from dead CoCoists or anything like that?
Well, it's not a CoCo thing, but I did purchase an M3 SE for my Model 4, so I'll be
that's cool.
monkeying with that at Tandy Assembly, so that'll be fun.
Very cool, very cool. In sort of the same groove, maybe, I picked up a couple of books on building TV games, as they call them. But this would be like old computer games without the computer. So, no microprocessor, no software per se, but, logic circuits and whatever to put things on the TV. Found a couple of them recently, and so that's been at least fun to browse through the pages. Probably be at best a distraction, but sounds like Tandy Assembly is a big thing. One last thing I should note. This past week we did have elections for officers for the Glenside Color Computer Club, and for those who haven't been paying attention, Glenside is the club that puts on CoCo Fest every year. I did originally nominated myself for vice president at Glenside, and by the time the actual official nominations rolled around, somehow I ended up being nominated for president. the votes are now in, and so I'll be the next president of Glenside, or maybe I already am. I'm not sure when the exact date of the transition is, but by the next meeting, I'll be the president of Glenside for sure. Hopefully that doesn't lead to dogs and cats living together or whatever. Long-term president Tony Petrezza.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations, John.
The long-term president and other office holder, Tony Petrezza, will still be on as the vice president. So hopefully we'll keep things on the rails, get things going to the extent they need to be. Just hope for the best. I think we can make some good positive change there. And, all right. Well, there's our introduction. So we'll be back with some announcements.
Hi, I'm Mike Rowan, one of the organizers of Tandy Assembly. We look forward to seeing everyone in Springfield, Ohio. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about one of the great events at Tandy Assembly. That's the No Minimum Bid Auction. First, all of the auction items are donated. All proceeds from the auction will go toward the cost of the event. The auction is a great opportunity to get some big bargains on unusual vintage computer items. It's also a great deal of fun to see people, sometimes best friends, trying to outbid each other. We certainly hope you'll join in the fun at Tandy Assembly. As I said before, all of the auction items are donated. If you have any items or duplicates in your collection that you are willing to donate to the auction, we would certainly appreciate your donations. Just bring them to Tandy Assembly or contact us through our webpage, www.tandyassembly.com. Thanks, and we look forward to a great time with everyone at Tandy Assembly.
All right, now we're back with some announcements. You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on Twitter as @CoCo Crew Podcast. That's all one word, CoCocrewpodcast. If you are prone to tweeting, then feel free to tweet at us, and we may tweet back. We are also available on Facebook as with a group called the CoCo Crew Podcast. That's 4 separate words. If you're on Facebook, come and check us out. We are, of course, available as a podcast on iTunes and on Google Play for downloading with your regular podcast listening application, and also available for streaming through Stitcher and on TuneIn. If any of those are your preferred way of listening to podcasts, then you should be covered. We are a member of, or have been a member of, the Throwback Network. Unfortunately, right now, it looks like throwbacknetwork.net has expired. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Hopefully the Throwback folks will take care of their domain before long, or if not, well, we may have to eliminate this part of the announcements. We are, of course, still listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub, and this, of course, is a list of technology-themed podcasts, or retro technology-themed podcasts, which covers arcade gaming, home video gaming, home computers, all that sort of thing from days past. So if you are looking for an alternative podcast outlet, once you're done listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, then do check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you have a need to host audio on the internet, then we recommend that you check out CyberEars, where you will get your audio on your terms. Should you want to reach out and communicate with the hosts at the CoCo Crew Podcast, we do have some email addresses set up. For reaching all of the hosts, we have 3 options. Show, SHOW, at CoCocrew.org. That's CoCocrew.org. We also have podcast, PODCAST, at CoCocrew.org. And feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCocrew.org. If you want to reach one of the hosts individually, then I'm available as John, JOHN, at CoCocrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, NEIL, at CoCocrew.org. Mike is available as Mike, MIKE, at CoCocrew.org. Boise is available as Boise, BOISY, at CoCocrew.org. And Ron, of course, is available as Ron, RON, at CoCocrew.org. Okay, that's our normal announcements. Coming up on November 10th of 2018, well, we have 2 events. One event is the Chicago TI International World's Fair 2018. If you like the other little machines from Texas, the Texas Instruments machines, then you may want to check out, especially if you're in the Chicago or Midwest area, you may want to check out the Chicago TI International World Fair. I'm sure it's a fine event. I'm sure they're all fine people. But really, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably want to go the November 10th to 11th to Tandy Assembly, which is happening in Springfield, Ohio, November 10th and 11th. This is a very cool event for all our Tandy brethren. We have an in with the organizers. We're pretty sure they're good folks, too. December 1st and 2nd of 2018, World of Commodore 2018, held in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. This is a Commodore event, but I believe it is open to other computers, or at least there'll be some on display of various topics. Neil usually goes to this one and tells us it's a great event. Flipping around to 2019, don't see too much early in the year, but coming up on April 12th through the 14th of 2019, we do show the Midwest Gaming Classic 2019, and that is being held at the Wisconsin Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Midwest Gaming Classic is a trade show featuring 100,000 plus square feet. That's pretty big. Of retro and modern home game computer consoles, pinball machines, arcade video games, computers, tabletop gaming, crane games, collectible card games, and air hockey. And that's just the start.
I was there last year, and it's about a half hour north of where I'm at, and it was excellent. I highly recommend this show. Anyone that's within driving distance, it's probably worth a flight. It's a very big event. A lot of people there, tons of video games, vintage computer equipment, pinball machines, a lot of great people to talk to. Again, highly recommended if you've never been to one.
Cool. Sounds like a cool event. And, if you need a place to stay, Ron's got a floor.
I got a shutout back, too. No heat.
All right. Well, very good. That's Wisconsin, April 12th to 14th, 2019, Midwest Gaming Classic. Of course, coming up a few weeks after that, May 4th and 5th, 2019, we are talking about CoCo Fest. CoCo Fest 2019. This will be the 28th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. This will be held, of course, at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois, where you may touch the heron.
Of course, I was going to say, of course, it's not the last one.
Yeah, not really. Hopefully, not really the last one. Just the last one that's still around. This is a big event that kind of brought us all together in the first place, and was the original impetus for this show to promote CoCo Fest. And so we still are promoting it, and hope everyone listening will find their way to Lombard, Illinois, which is part of what's known as Chicagoland. Come and hang out. Like you say, touch the heron. Very exciting stuff. And, of course, one last event on our calendar for the Apple II folks coming up in July of 2019, July 15th to 21st. Yes, that is, 6 days? You're looking at Kansas Fest 2019. Will be held at Rockhurst University, Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah, that's our last event on the schedule, so hope you enjoy the announcements. We're going to take another break, and then we will be back with some news.
League bowling, a great American pastime. If you belong to a league or manage a league, you need Bowling League Secretary from Tom Ellico. It runs on any color computer 1, 2, or 3 with a disk drive, a printer, and just 32K of RAM. Bowling League Secretary is user-friendly with easy-to-use menus. You can track any number of teams and over 200 bowlers. It calculates and stores stats for every team and every bowler. It can handle men's, women's, mixed, scratch, or handicap blinds and substitutes. Start up any time in the season. It features automatic backups with weekly, mid-season, and end-season resets. Bowling League Secretary includes a 20-page instruction manual. And most of all, it frees you up to do what you love most. Bowling. The Bowling League Secretary is just $49.95 with free shipping. From Tom Ellico, Doylestown, PA.
This week, the CoCo Crew podcast is brought to you by Gimme Crisp Cereal.
Most any cereal is fine with me, as long as you spell it G-I-M-E. Magenta, red, buff, yellow, and green. Keeps your mind sharp and your body lean.
Start your day right with a delicious bowl of Gimme Crisp cereal. Crispy oat O's with colors of the Tandy Color Computer. Served with milk and juice, it's part of a complete breakfast, and moms love its 3 vitamins and herbs. And for a limited time, you can get 1 of 5 Color Computer program packs free. Just send $3 handling and 5 box tops from specially marked boxes of Gimme Crisp. Choose from Clowns and Balloons, Atom, Bingo Math, Color Backgammon, and Dino Wars.
Magenta, red, buff, yellow, and green. Keeps your mind sharp and your body lean. Gimme Crisp.
All right, CoCo Cruisers. I hope you enjoyed the announcements. And now it's time for some news.
All right, our first news item this month, we're starting off with Jim Gary. Wouldn't be a podcast without hearing from him. He's released, transferred a new game. It's called Adventure Tour of Castles. I checked it out briefly. It looks kind of cool.
It kind of harkens back to some of those Atari adventure games. Kind of reminds me of that.
That's what I was thinking. It looks just like that.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be an implementation of Adventure from the Atari. And this Tour of Castles is just his little demo. He's showing you how to go back and forth.
Okay, that's
in the map.
That's cool.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So.
Well, that's an iconic game, so that's a good game he's doing. I mean, there's a following behind that game.
Yep. So pretty cool. So let's say it's kind of right up Jim's alley, I think. So
yeah, that's awesome. All right, our next news item is from Brian Weisler. I think I'm pronouncing his last name. And he posted up on Facebook here to restore or not to restore. That is the question. So basically, what he's asking is, is it okay if you get a computer that has a bad case and you want to clean it up and restore it?
Yeah. So I thought, we could probably have a discussion about this at some point, but yeah, it's always a good point. It seems to come up from time to time. Like, well, I've got this old machine. It kind of half works. I could sell it for parts or whatever. But some people take it a lot farther than just making sure it's reasonably clean and working. Some people repaint them or think you have to retrobrite everything, or you get people now that get machines in and not even doing anything with them. They just immediately strip them and recap them and replace the CPU, and it's like, well, that's great and all, but probably not necessary in a lot of cases.
No, I agree. Especially that recapping thing too. Not everything needs to be recapped. Some of those old capacitors are much better quality than the new ones you buy today.
Yeah,
they're they were a really good Japanese quality.
Well, some of the commenters here kind of make the point too is like, well, if that needs to be done, that's kind of part of the hobby for some people, is doing it themselves, and so in a sense, you might be kind of taking that away from the buyer. Now, on the other hand, there's usually somebody else, some other thing you could buy if you. So you might be helping out somebody who doesn't want to do all that. So
right, that's a good point.
Kind of goes both ways, but anyway, interesting topic.
Next news item is from Jan Derogi. The title is VIC-20 Full Motion Video. Now, that I haven't had a chance to check this out, but that definitely sounds cool, especially on the VIC-20.
Reminds me of another project someone did several years ago.
Yeah, definitely has some thoughts about that. It is cool to see, somebody else doing the same kind of thing, and he can talk about it. He's got some special hardware he's using, and does that make it better or worse? Or, who knows? But it's something. So kind of a cool idea.
I won't be impressed until they stick a Glenside ID controller in the side of that thing.
Yeah.
Well, they do have some special contraption they plug into the user port there, so who knows?
Cool video, though. Cool video.
Yep. And, it could be a CoCo project. Maybe it doesn't need to be now, but.
You were ahead of the time there.
A little bit, yeah.
All right, our next news item is from our very own Paul Thayer. Paul is very active in the CoCo community. You can see him on Facebook all the time, and he's working on a new game, and he posted a video sample of the intro for it, and I must say it looks fantastic. I mean, the graphics look just like Nintendo. Nice sprites on there, and then the music is good too, the chiptune music. I know he has Simon helping him out with that.
Yep, well, it's always cool to see people doing new games and new software or whatever. And so, I'm always a little wary on anything that's like a pre-announcement, but you know.
yeah, you get excited and then you hope it comes out.
Sure.
Yeah. But the intro, the title screen definitely looks good, and that music playing is nice. So let's hope he keeps up the good work there. Our next news item is from Walter Zambodi.
Yep.
And the title is OVCC Picture Gallery.
Yeah, unfortunately, this link doesn't have basically no text except for the titles of the pictures. But this is supposed to be where he's showing kind of some of the progress of his. This is a guy who's porting the VCC over to use the open source graphics or whatever. He's demoing some of his user interface stuff. Basically, it's just a visual progress report that Open VCC is still making some progress. So for VCC lovers out there that also want to use Linux or maybe even just unupdated, even on Windows, there it is.
Well, that sounds all right. I mean, there's a lot of people use VCC, so that doesn't sound bad. All right, next news item is from Pierre Sarrazin, and he's just released a new version of CMOC. Version 0.1.55 is out, and this version has new read-write, disk extended color basic file library.
Yeah, how about that? So CMOC's been popular and since it came out. Started out as C-like, it was the description, and I think that's still kind of the official description is C-like. The list of places where it differs from C seems to have whittled down a little bit to where you're a bit less likely to hit most of them. So good to see some improvements over time there. Seems like lately a lot of the effort's been adding various libraries, both Pierre and sound like some other people Ron was telling us about.
So Brendan Donahue with the CoCo VGA, he came out with a new program called CCV Edit. It's a character editor that you can redefine character sets using his CoCo VGA product. And I got a chance to try it out just prior to him releasing it on his site. We'll make sure a link is on our show notes for it. But it works very well. And when Brendan was talking about it, he said that a lot of the work was done with the CMOC compiler and that some of the new libraries that are in it helped him develop this. So the program works very, very well. And, it just goes to show you that CMOC seems to be making some pretty good progress. And some of the folks out there that are, C developers, while it's not C, John, like you said, it seems to be similar enough in some instances to really help. So that continues to help promote, software development. That's great.
I think unless you're trying to port something really strange that already exists, or if you're somebody who has a very peculiar style, then you're probably going to be fine, is my impression. There may be some, there's always going to be that corner case, right, where I just have to do this weird thing, and it may or may not, accommodate you in all those cases. But guess what? Any other compiler may or may not accommodate you in all those cases too. So.
Our next one is from Paul Fiscarelli, and it's Long Branch Never, Episode 0, the channel introduction. This is a cool site. Paul is starting a series on assembly language programming on the color computer, and glad to see him doing it.
Yeah, he's got a couple of more episodes out too. I didn't put the links in here, but I'm sure you can find them once you get to YouTube. But yeah, it seems to be the new thing is everyone trying to help each other learn assembly language. So this is another resource for those that want to learn. And he goes through and he sets up a build environment and walks you through some simple instructions on how how the language works and that sort of stuff. And so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Paul's going to be at Tandy Assembly, so
all right.
If you want to ask him in person, come out and see him. Okay, our next story is designing a 6809 single board computer. This is by David Wood. He has designed a small, it's probably about 3 or 4 inches square, single board 6809 computer. Has a couple serial ports on it. Neil, I think this is the one we saw at VCF, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, it should be.
Yes, and he's got. I believe he's got a. Did he have a 6800 version as well?
Yes.
But anyways, he's got 6809, and it's a cool little board. When we saw it, we just saw the monitor program he had running on it, and some instructions and sample programs. His intention is to get OS 9 running on it. So it's a cool little board, be fun to play with. So definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, it's always cool when somebody develops some new hardware, and sometimes it can be fun just to play with something that's not quite a CoCo or whatever, but you can transfer some of those retro skills over to another piece of hardware with the same processor. Very cool.
All right, our next item is from Christopher Peterson. Pong implemented in Color Basic for the TRS-80 Color Computer 1.
Always good to have a chance to play Pong, right?
Yeah, the classic there. He's got, if you go out this website, he's got the source code for it, so you can put it in and play.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like to see projects where, people are doing something, it's relatively simple. It's hard to get a game more simple than Pong. I'm sure there are some, but, document something is sort of a start of something. And document it helps, when you document something you're doing, it helps you know it better, and helps others learn from it, and maybe they can pick up from there and do something else. And it's just, I think it's a healthy thing to see people doing that sort of stuff. So good to see that.
Absolutely. All right, our next item is from Joel Rees. Script for converting 6800 to 6809. I believe this is a Perl script that he developed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is to convert 6800 assembly to 6809. Is that correct?
That was my understanding. Now, one thing, of course, is, one of the design goals of the 6809 was to be source code compatible, but to move upwardly from the 6800 to 6809. So, and I'm pretty sure, like LWSM, I'm pretty sure has a mode specifically for that, and I've seen other assemblers that also accommodate that. And so it's like not every instruction, is literally accommodated with a single instruction, but, there's certain instructions that, well, you just throw in this other instruction that does the same thing or effectively the same thing, So instead of like an INC-X, there'll be an LEAX of 1X. That's for those who speak the language, shall we say. So I'm not really sure how much of a necessity this was. And Joel said he was just looking for something to occupy his mind. So that's fine. And if you don't have if your 6809 assembler that you want to use doesn't already accommodate those extra, mnemonics, then this might be a useful tool. But I think mostly just an exercise for Joel. So very cool.
Yeah.
There's a double agent in the organization. The fate of the free world is in your hands. The agent's code name, Aki Waki. It's your job to uncover who Aki Waki really is. But identifying him won't be easy. You don't have much time, and it could be any of 32 different suspects. Travel to exotic capitals. Make contact with informants. Scrutinize dossiers. Can you assemble the necessary clues to uncover the true identity of Aki Waki in time? Aki Waki is $22.95 on cassette, $24.95 on disc. 32K extended color basic required. From Shooting Star Software, Chico, California. Turn any color computer with extended basic into a complete disk system with the new FD501 color thin line disk from Radio Shack. Store over 156K of data. Write your own disk programs or use ready-to-run software. The disk operating system is built into the program pack cartridge that connects the disk drive to your color computer, and the FD501 has room to add a second drive, providing an additional 156K of storage. This month only, purchase a 2-drive FD501 color thin-line disk system for just $359.95. That's a 25% savings. Apply in-store for a CityLine revolving account and pay as low as $20 per month. The FD501 thin-line disk. Only from Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
All right, our next one is from Ken Reichard, and it's an MC10 program that plays the bar game NIM.
Yeah, pretty cool. And I think he had this both. He ended up with a CoCo version as well. But Ken's one of those guys on the other show, shall we say, that is a little bit prone to taking some shots at the MC10, but it's good to know that his heart's really in the right place. So we all love the MC10. We just don't all want to admit it.
Showing the love, yeah.
Yeah. Is Ken and Jason, they're brothers, right? And they're in the Ohio area. Are they going to Tandy Assembly?
I know Jason is. I think he's going to have a table there. I'm not sure about Ken, but I imagine he'll be there too.
Oh, well, let's hope.
All right. Our next one is from Ryan Craddock at Nintendo Life. Random fans ask for a Philips CDI Classic. Philips says, "We will try our best."
Oh, man.
It's like, so we've all seen the Nintendo Classic, Super Nintendo Classic. There's probably some others that are in the same lines. And, a lot of those, and they put them out and they fly off the shelves, and it's just incredible how well they sell, partly because of managed shortages, I think. But this one, the CDI, of course, for those that don't know, the CDI has a history that involves the OS 9 operating system, running on the 68000 or 68070, I guess. It definitely has something in common with the MM1, for example. But otherwise, not a real well-known or beloved gaming environment. So the notion of, making a CDI Classic, it just seemed a little comical to me. I don't know. What do you think, Boise?
I like the idea. I think it's pretty cool. Well, I say that because I used to work at Michael Bear and the OS 9 operating system ran the thing. I think I was looking to have a CDI machine that I don't have hooked up right now, but I have a number of games. It would be cool to have something small you could hook up to as a TV, a modern TV, and play some of the games there. Pretty good idea. I'm kind of surprised somebody came up with it. I never thought about it. And I guess in this day and age when you have this retro movement, that might be a candidate for that. Pretty cool.
So,
I think for a lot of people, it'll be their first chance at one. So
yeah,
that's true. Mike. Yeah.
And that might be an interesting twist, an interesting marketing twist in some ways. It's like, well, you guys missed out on this, but it actually is kind of cool. Why don't you check it out? I wonder how many people would go for that.
Well, one of the things I wonder about is how would you approach, if you were Philips, how would you approach the licensing? Because microware in its current form is different than what it used to be whenever it existed when CDI was first out. So it'd be interesting to tackle some of those challenges.
I imagine Alan, what's his name, Bettinger? I'm sure he'd love to see a check from Philips.
Yeah. I was going to say, and you could play Hotel Mario on it.
Yeah, that was quite a good game, too, Neil. Remember that?
That's funny.
Actually, you know what? I wouldn't mind having one of those retro CDIs just so I could get a new controller, because you can't find controllers for CDIs anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they're hard to come by.
Yeah.
Probably made out of the same thing as Nuon controllers.
Next round of prototype PCBs for the Gimme. Is it the Gimme 10 or the Gimme X?
I think it's Gimme X, but I really don't know. I think people say Gimme X.
Yeah, I'm so used to saying OS 10, looking at an X at every X. But anyway. Yeah, so this apparently is by Ed Snyder. This is part of a project where they're going to reproduce the Gimme on, I think, an FPGA and make it compatible so that it fits in the socket, the CoCo 3. looks like that they're going through a second round of prototypes. So something this complex, a project this complex, I'm sure you have to tweak it and try different things and fix problems in earlier boards. So this is actually progress. So it means that they're forging ahead on a very complex project.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's bound to be a lot, especially if you really want to get it right. There's bound to be a lot of quirkiness and weird bugs to recreate just to make sure things actually work. Not to mention, mechanical problems of, I made this board, but it doesn't actually fit in the socket because of this or that, Hopefully those are taking care of themselves, but yeah, there's bound to be some revisions there. So we'll see what finally happens.
I saw some comments on the Facebook post about people asking if it'll be compatible with certain memory boards from other vendors, and that's always something you have to be concerned with, I guess. But I'm sure that Ed and company will do what they can to, to accommodate other memory upgrades and things.
Is there more than one CoCo 3 motherboard?
Not for the U.S., but the Australian
Right.
For layout. I know that.
So at least it's limited. It's not like the CoCo. The CoCo VGA has to have like 8 different versions to fit all the various CoCo 1s and 2s and Dragons and whatever.
Right. They really went crazy with the various revs of the CoCo 2. Very good. The next topic is on using retro game artwork in commercial projects.
Yeah.
So this appears to be a guy that is debating or talking about using retro-ish artwork for projects that are commercial, I guess game projects. John, I didn't read this too closely. What's your take on it?
Yeah, so it's mostly just an interesting discussion. There are copyright issues with using some of this old artwork that people are... some people are borrowing old images for their kind of knockoff homebrew games, and and some of them are retro or games for retro hardware. Some of them are old style games for on their iPhones or their Android or whatever. And I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting discussion about intellectual property and how does it apply to some of this stuff. And a lot of people don't think about those sort of things, or when they do get called on intellectual property issues, they act like they're being picked on by the big man or whatever. And maybe perhaps sometimes they are, but there are people do have rights to some of these things, and you'd be wise to pay attention to the issues before you get too deeply into a project. That's for sure. So I just thought it might be something worth spend a little time digesting for people.
Absolutely. All right. The next item is I started working on a basic interpreter on Windows to help speed up basic coding on the CoCo 321 by Sheldon McDonald.
Yeah.
It looks like Sheldon wrote a basic interpreter on Windows, and he's able to put in CoCo basic commands and write basic CoCo compatible basic. Is that what you take from this?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a different way of it's almost like a CoCo emulator just for basic. So he's not bothering with like cycle accuracy or emulating the actual 6809 chip per se, but more like, well, if I write this basic code, what do I expect to happen on the basic screen? You know what I mean? And so it's sort of it's almost just the way that, you might write something in assembly language and then want to launch the emulator to run, and so you can see if it's working or not before you go to real hardware. This is almost like, the basic coder's streamlined equivalent, where you'd write something and then run it in this language emulator or whatever before you actually go to try to run it on real hardware. So if you're writing something in BASIC, it's probably a nice, or could be a nice thing to have in your quiver of arrows, so to speak, and probably takes some of the pain out of trying to write stuff in CoCo Basic. If nothing else, you don't have to type on an actual CoCo keyboard, which I don't know about you guys, but the CoCo keyboards seem to fit my fingers a lot better when I was 10 than they do now.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a cool project.
Yeah, it's always good to have tools that help you accelerate your development on the current modern platforms that you're using. This is a good idea. Good work.
That's cool. We just need a Linux version now.
Exactly.
And a Mac version.
Yeah, that's right.
Can't leave us out. Okay, the next news item is Jeff Sinclair's minigame ports to MC10 playthrough by Jim Gary. This looks like another port of a game. I'm not familiar with this particular game. I'm looking at it, and it's running on the MC10. Is that right, John?
Yeah, so I think so, but I think it comes from Jim Gary, but I think maybe he's demoing somebody else's work. So maybe Jim Gary has a protege or a partner or something like that. But yeah, so another source of entertainment for your MC10, if nothing else.
Very nice.
So very cool.
The MC10 continues to thrive.
It's amazing.
I gotta say, we may have to branch out and create a MC10 crew podcast pretty soon.
Well, you know, they do make up the MC10 crowd does give us a lot of material each month, so they could just about have their own podcast. Maybe we should have an MC10 special episode. So we've got 40-some episodes, but only one special episode, so maybe we should have maybe that should be our Christmas episode, all MC10 Christmas. That'd be funny.
Well, that group seems to be growing, so.
Yep. Cool.
Long live the MC10. All right, the next news item is a UDP debugger plus IP stack for the Tandy color computer by Brett Gordon. This link takes me to a GitHub site, Zombie Protocol for the Tandy color computer. This is an attempt at a UDP debugging monitor startup code in 6809 assembler.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's, I just see a bunch of source files. I see some drive wire read and write files, so I'm presuming this might use drive wire routines for the bit banger.
Yeah, so I've been watching in this project. Brett's doing a lot of communicating on Discord or reporting his progress over there. And so I think he may actually have at least the beginnings, not just of a UDP stack, but also TCP on top, which with TCP, of course, is a side protocol to UDP, both of which ride on top of IP. If that's too many little acronyms for you, I apologize. But basically what I'm saying is a UDP IP stack is impressive. A TCP IP stack is even more impressive. But he's doing a lot of work there. And for that lowest level, I think he's actually forming Ethernet frames. And he can use the Ethernet cards. He has one of the ones that Jim Brain developed. I think also he's got modifications maybe or a special version of some. I think he may have a special version of DriveWire. I think he's also using it's called LW wire, which is William Astl's kind of modified version. Right. And I think I heard him mention the Pi DriveWire too. So he may be getting all the DriveWire variations in to get basically a packet style of interface available, so that you may not actually need the Ethernet card to send Ethernet frames as long as you have DriveWire. Hey, whatever. So pretty impressive that he's got that. And then he's so I guess the debugger part is he's focusing on having a monitor style or a debugging style of program running so that you'll be able to load code over the internet or over Ethernet or whatever to your CoCo. I don't know, pretty cool. I mean, a little bit of a hacker project or whatever, but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, he's made some good progress on it. I saw the discussion on Discord as well, and he's got it grabbing an IP from a DHCP server. He's got it loading multiple part binaries online. It's pretty impressive, the progress he's made in a short amount of time.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, this is sort of something that people have talked about in the community, the CoCo community, for a while, having a true software-based IP stack that ran on the CoCo, as opposed to doing things like what DriveWire 4 does and borrows or lets the PC do the heavy lifting of the actual stack and make a very simplistic protocol on the CoCo side. So this is good. This is good geek bulldog stuff.
Yeah, definitely impressive that it. Like I said, I think he's got some TCP going. UDP over IP is a pretty thin layer, and probably not, in the greatest scheme of things, speaking as, you know, armchair quarterback here, probably not the hardest thing. Getting TCP is probably almost an order of magnitude harder on top there. And then, you know, like I said, being able to make good use of all that on the CoCo and still be able to tie your shoes or whatever is pretty amazing work. So very cool.
Good job. All right, the final news item for me, for those who have a drag and drive, by Mike Miller. I go to the link. I can't see it because I'm not a member of the Dragon.
Oh, sorry.
Rescue.
Yeah, so Drag and Drive is this thing from Scooter Bugage. I ordered one, and I think Neil ordered one. It's almost like a drag. Well, there's a couple of things you can describe like this, but it's almost like a Dragon CoCo STC. This one incorporates a USB kind of floppy emulator that you can plug USB sticks in or whatever. It's still kind of new and under development, and the links, it says, for those who have a Drag and Drive, here's a handy hint. Put a file named ff.cfg in the root of your USB stick. It should contain a single line as follows: host equals tandy-coco. Then the drive will recognize .dsk file names as containing JVC format, because I guess otherwise it's looking for VDK because it's a Dragon thing. So anyway, in case anybody else has got the Dragon Drive, there's the link, and maybe it's helpful to you in the future.
Polar Attack. Yes, but Tandy MC10 game and 10 lines of basic by David Mitchell. So with all the new games coming out for the MC10, seems like lately, not only is this game fun to play, it's 10 lines, like it says, and it's actually very impressive. You have basically a bear that's coming after you that you have to shoot. And John, was this part of a contest? Is this one of those 10-line contests they have?
You know, I don't know. I mean, they certainly have those kind of contests, but I don't know if this was part of one or not. I don't think it says anything about it. So I don't know. Yeah, I was going to mention that the 10-line thing. So yeah, this is Davey Mitchell. What do you guys think of the 10-line stuff? I mean, it's definitely a skill, right? It's definitely hard to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine how you write anything in 10 lines, and they definitely do all this where they, you know, take out all the spaces or you know, put things together and whatever. And it's if you wanted to get, I guess what I'm saying is, it's cool and it's neat. If you wanted to be one of those, I'm a professional programmer and this is a bad way to do kind of thing. You can say, well, it's almost like code terrorism, right? It's like you make some really ugly code that does amazing things, almost like an obfuscated C program or something. At some point, maybe we should have a discussion about that. That might be an interesting host discussion where some of us can pontificate on proper style and all that sort of jazz. But it is. I mean, it's amazing. You know, like I said, 10 lines. No matter how much you stick them and make them as long as possible or whatever, it's just having 10 points to jump to in a program doesn't seem like you'd even have enough flexibility to, you know. Well, imagine if you wanted to, you know, pose your G.I. Joe action figure and you could only bend them in 10 places, right? He's only going to go in so many directions. So it's kind of amazing anybody can write those 10-line stuff or whatever. But beyond that, this particular game looks pretty cool. It looks kind of fun. So like I said, this is sort of like MC10 month or something, but it's always amazing to see how much stuff we get for the MC10 in here.
It is, and I keep an MC10 hooked up just to try out some of these things. And, without going too much on the 10 lines, it's interesting because when you look at some of the other computer platforms out there, when you're dealing with 10 lines of code, some basic interpreters allow longer lines of code. And like you said, you can also concatenate commands together. Not all basic interpreters allow you to do quite as much as the color computer with regards to just keep tagging command after command after command on the same line. So, maybe some computers have more of an advantage than others, but it's an impressive game. Readability is not always there when you're looking at the source code, but it's
right.
But it's fun to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm blown away. I'm watching this video
game.
here. I haven't tried it.
Yeah,
yet
it's great.
myself. What gets me is, there's even sound in there. So, 10 lines, you got the game, the graphics, and the sound. That's impressive.
Yeah, like I say, 10 lines. To me, 10 lines means there's only 10 places you can jump, including the beginning of the program. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
no matter how much you can stick on one line, that's one line that you're only doing one thing on that one line. And so, it's hard to do. It's hard to bend so many ways without having a few more lines to jump to. So
yeah.
Now that said, I don't, as a professional programmer, I don't want to make 10-line programs because they'd probably be really, really ugly. But still, it's kind of amazing, right? So.
All right, our next news item: Bomb Jack dissected. From Andre Weisflog. So I did read most of this article. It's a lengthy technical write-up that he did on his desire to emulate the arcade version of Bomb Jack. And I guess he was doing some comparisons to some of the home computer versions. And he goes through and he looks like he spent quite a bit of time on this. He gets into a fairly detailed discussion on breakdowns of not only the hardware, boot up sequences, things of that nature. I haven't even finished reading the whole thing just yet. It's pretty lengthy, but very interesting. Now, this game I have not even played, though I have seen it. I know it's been around for a number of years.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever tried it, and I don't even know if is there a CoCo version of this?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
I wasn't sure.
That was part of why I thought it was cool to put on here. Plus the interesting to read the analysis or whatever. But yeah, I don't think there is a Bomb Jack clone for the CoCo. Could be wrong because I'm not an expert. But I do think a Bomb Jack is the kind of game that you could do a version and it would fit the CoCo pretty well. Maybe a CoCo 3, but still, I think it's in the CoCo's range of capability. So if it inspires you, then please do and learn what you can from the article and then go code.
So this could be a good
the
CoCo
MC10
project.
version.
Yeah, start with the MC10
version.
Start with the
MC10, 10 lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would have to be an award for that.
Yeah.
What a gorgeous night.
Harvey, I called the exterminator for you.
Exterminator?
Yeah, I heard you telling your friends that your TRS-80 has mice.
Mice? No. I was talking about the MISE, the M1 SE from Bartlett Labs.
So there's no mice?
No, it's the Model 1 system expander. It adds all kinds of great new capabilities to your TRS-80.
That's a relief.
It lets you connect an SVGA monitor, Ethernet, a joystick. All my programs can fit on a compact flash drive.
I'll call and cancel the exterminator.
Hold on a second, Madge. Don't cancel. I think we might have owls. The Model 1 system expander from Bartlett Labs. Get more information at bartlettlabs.com.
New from Intelligent Devices. Break the 64K barrier with our 128K RAM board. Easy solderless installation and all of the software is included. You get Big Basic that enhances Color Computer Basic with simple commands and it's fully transparent to existing software. It revolutionizes graphics and animation. Key clear up to 54 graphics pages. Load 3 full-size basic programs in memory or create a 90K super program. And for OS 9 users, Fast 09 software is included. Fast09 adds a new RBF device /V to OS 9. It works just like D0 and D1, but 10 times faster. Move your commands directory to /V and execute commands in less than a second. The 128K RAM board with Big Basic and Fast09 is just $139.95 from Intelligent Devices. And coming soon, 512K RAM board. Intelligent users use intelligent devices.
Specify CoCo 1 DEF board or CoCo 2 when ordering. Intelligent Devices, Mountain View, California.
All right, our next news item, a new way to fix yellowed plastics indoors. Adrian Black. So I guess this is along the lines of people that use like retrobrighting techniques for kind of reversing the yellowing effects of the plastics that were used on these old computers and things like that. But it's using a Philips bulb, and it's like a blue LED, and there's all sorts of information about how there is some risk with using that type of bulb, as far as your eyes are concerned. So, in looking, there's a video, I think there's a link for this where there's a video showing the process that was used. I guess these Philips bulbs have been out for a while. And
I was kind of the impression that you might have trouble finding the bulbs, but I don't really know because I'm not the kind of guy that's been interested in LED bulbs. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's I thought it was neat. A lot of people think retrobrighting is an important thing to do, and you got to wait for a sunny day or whatever. I don't know the whole process, but if there's a way to do it indoors, maybe it's a little less messy. I'm not sure, but it's kind of interesting from a science point of view, if nothing else.
Yeah, I've never, from a retrobright perspective, I've watched a lot of videos on different techniques used. This is definitely something quite a bit different than I've seen. There's just so many ways that people have to, they've come up with to reverse this stuff. But, when you're dealing with these blue LEDs, I don't know. There seems to be, like I said, some risk with it. So nothing I'm going to mess with right now.
Do not try this at home, just for education only.
Right. All right. So we have a very interesting news item next here. Emulate a ZX Spectrum on an emulated Commodore 64, on an emulated DOS, on emulated Windows in Linux. Wow. Now, I'm not exactly sure why this person would do this, other than to say it's pretty neat to do. Did anybody check this out? Because this looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, I looked at it a little bit. It reminds me of back in the days of the Amiga guys who thought that somehow their machine was blessed with the only machine able to emulate other computers. If you ever knew anybody like that. And so they would do stuff like this where they'd stack up something and they'd emulate a Mac, emulating an Atari ST, emulating DOS, that kind of stuff. But beyond that, the emulating DOS on top of Windows on top of Linux, so that's not all that unusual probably. Lots of people run Wine on Linux, and maybe some of those people need to run DOSBox on Wine. Who knows why, but the first part is what got me. Emulating a ZX Spectrum on top of a Commodore 64. Wow. That's kind of neat, right? And so it reminds me of the CPM emulator someone did for CoCo 3, which is mostly, I think, a Z80 emulator. And that's what the ZX Spectrum runs, but if you expanded that out to then emulate the graphics system, that must be what they're doing here. So if a Commodore 64 can emulate a ZX Spectrum, why can't a CoCo 3 or a CoCo 2 even? I don't know. Seems like something somebody ought to be able to do.
Be here. So our next item from Barry Nelson is boot floppy for DOSBox on Jeff Avasauer's CoCo 3 emulator. That's the old DOS-based emulator that Jeff had. And what's interesting about Barry's image, and this was always something that I could not get to work using DOSBox, is to get the 512K up and running on his emulator. You needed a really strange combination of the old DOS high mem and different things like that. And I guess Barry must have figured out the magic combination for it because he's got that working. So anyone that's interested in running this old emulator, in DOSBox, it's ready to go.
Right.
There were some neat utilities that Jeff had provided with that emulator, especially around floppy disk images, which I thought was neat. It's just, it's one of those emulators that's been around for so long, and it's not easy to run on most machines anymore. So
yeah, Well, I mean, that is software. That happens to software, right? New systems come out, and eventually, even though they're supposed to be compatible, they're not. Yeah, this was, this kind of relates to the previous link in that I think it was Salvador Garcia was asking about running the Vavasor emulator on top of DOSBox, whatever reason, and having trouble with it because, one emulator on top of another. So I think what Barry's doing here, so DOSBox by itself, it is essentially a PC emulator, but it kind of, by default, it sort of runs its own little system, its own like DOS version or whatever. But it has a way that you can tell it to essentially boot off a floppy, and that's what Barry's got is an actual DOS image that he's booting off of. And then since he's booting real DOS, then he's got a config.sys that actually loads mm.sys or whatever it's supposed to run. So I think that's his trick. I don't know the exact details. I'd have to ask Barry, but
yeah, I'll have to look a little closer. I did try a long time ago to do that with a DOS 623. I think that was the last version, and whatever EMM 386 it had in the high mem, but I couldn't get it to go. So I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but it was something where you'd like to see the 512K on the CoCo 3 if you could. So, but if anyone's interested, here it is. He's got the image out there. He posted on Facebook, and it seems to work. So
cool.
And then the last news item for me here is recovering data from a vintage MFM drive. It has been such a long time since I've used one of those hard drives. I remember going into the old DOS debug and typing in the blocking out the bad blocks on the media error maps and things like that. This person looks like he's found a way to pull the data, but it looks like he was just using a very old Pentium motherboard to do it. I didn't. I wasn't sure what kind of data he was trying to pull off the drive. I don't know if anyone else read the article on this.
Yeah, I just kind of glanced at it. I thought it might be interesting because of the the MFM part.
Was that used in the CoCo? I mean, was MFM drives? Was that the early hard drives for the CoCo? Is that what they used to use for those?
That's what you
do. Is that way, right?
Yeah, with the Burke and Burke or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure what exactly they had inside those big black ones you get from Tandy, but but the Burke and Burke, I think used the MFM or RLL, which is similar. Anyway, I just thought it might be interesting for some folks.
And I forgot to mention that was from Tom Nardi on Hackaday.
Well, cool. Well, I'll take up the last few here. First item of announcement of the Chapter 8 of the Gunstar development blog. Nick Morentis describing his in-progress development of this game Gunstar, and he's got an example of the way he is managing his graphic screens and building them from separate sources so that you kind of get the virtual effect as if there were, multiple layers on the screen. You kind of got to pay attention when you read it because it's kind of, I move it to this buffer and then I move it to that buffer. It's like I move it to this buffer at the bottom and we copy from the bottom of buffer 1 to the top of buffer 2. It's like, well, why didn't you just copy the bottom to the bottom? I'm not sure. So you kind of have to walk through it and see, oh, okay, he's sort of scrolling or whatever, that sort of thing. Then he talks about his buffers are kind of oversized, so he's having to clip them off, but he does that so that you're preserving space so that if your sprite does fly off the side, you don't have to do any math to only draw part of the sprite. You can go ahead and draw all of the sprite, even though some of it will be off the side of the screen. Check it out, read it. It's fairly educational, probably good for some folks. All right, moving on. Paul Shoemaker. He says, my Wizardry clone is not vaporware. I swear. Just taking me a very long time. So he's doing a game. He calls his Sorcery. Like I said, it's a clone of Wizardry, which was fairly well-known kind of would you consider it an RPG game?
Yeah, it's an RPG. There's a version on the Nintendo.
Okay.
Yeah, I was checking out this link here from Paul. It looks pretty cool from what he's guys done so far.
Yeah, so it looks like an interesting game, and if you like that sort of swords and sorcery kind of role-playing game on a computer, it looks like this may be just what you need. So hopefully Paul will find some time and crank that out, and we'll have one more game to play.
Well, it's not vaporware, so that's good.
Yeah, there you go. So mistyware. Oh, Lord. Okay, well, a little bit of sad news. Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, has died at the age of 65. He's also interesting as someone who has built a it's called the Living Computer Museum, which is a place to go and play with old computers, mostly bigger stuff, I think. But anyway, so Mr. Allen, I guess, is a victim of cancer and has now passed. So anyway, Paul Allen from Microsoft, dead at 65. Okay, moving on. Degaussing coil to restore gameplay like it's 1985. So, I don't know how many of you have ever had this. First time I ever really noticed it was when I had an old monitor back in the day when I was in college. I had a monitor that kept on one of those swing-out arms that you used to get. You could swing your monitor out and kind of have it hover over your desk while you were typing or whatever. And I had one of those, and I was in the middle of moving stuff and kind of had taken stuff off my desk and then swung out my arm and with a monitor on it, and then there was nothing to hold the other end of the desk down. And the monitor fell off, and the monitor fell face first onto the concrete floor, but for whatever reason it did not actually, well, there was a little crack in the plastic, but the monitor still worked, except for a little while it's like one corner of it was like red or something, a little different color. And eventually I was able to go after that with a bulk tape eraser to get it evened out. But anyway, so yeah, sometimes CRTs will get like magnetized or whatever, and the colors that they display won't look quite right. And one of the things that some of the TVs actually tend to have a degaussing coil built into them that's supposed to activate when you turn the television on. Sometimes they don't work, or they don't work as well as they're supposed to. So anyway, if you do have a tube monitor that has got this weird color, splotchiness or whatever, sometimes you can go after them with like a tape demagnetizer or something like that, and get rid of that anomaly. So anyway, you may want to read the article, and it might be better than my description. The link is in the show notes. All right. So here's Alan Badager. I finally bit the bullet and posted an initial version of OS 9 Community Edition. Now this is OS 9, modern OS 9. This I assume is based on their C-based kernel that's sometimes called OS 9000. Anyways, this is for running on VirtualBox it's an x86 build. But you can get it and install OS 9 under VirtualBox and play with OS 9 to your heart's content. Sounds like they have the Ultra C resident, so you can build stuff with the C language and do all kinds of OS 9 stuff. Took us 3 days to hear from Boise after this came out. Okay, that was just a little joke.
Bada boom.
Anyway, so, for those of you who are CoCo people second and OS 9 people first, then this may be a way for you to get OS 9 back into your life on a modern-ish machine. And he'll probably eventually, it looks like his plan is to have at least releases for the ARM machines, like the BeagleBone or the Raspberry Pi, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, very cool.
Cool. Yeah.
So we've got a game from Steve Bamford, and he's actually announced this one earlier, and this is more like an update. The title... So I guess the true title is, I guess that's supposed to be Japanese. I don't really know for sure, but got a not really translation so much as a English alphabet version that I think probably reads something like Furuki Noshima, but I think the actual English translation is supposed to be Circe's Island, and Circe, of course, is a figure from Greek mythology. If you landed on Circe's Island as a man, you're prone to being transformed into a beast of some sort, which seems to be part of the story of the game here. Anyway, I know everyone on the list of things had access to, on the group here has some access to see this. But it's a kind of it's almost like a platform game, except there's really only one platform. It's a kind of a jump and run sort of game, collecting treasures and that sort of thing. And it's some resource management in there because you have to manage your health and try to collect gold points or whatever. Pretty cool little game that I've enjoyed. But the biggest thing is that this is a game that actually makes use of the Game Master cartridge, which is the design I've been hawking for a while. And uses the SN76489 chip thereupon for playing delightful music. And so I've enjoyed our ability to test this on real hardware. Looking forward for the game to be finished so that we can actually make cartridges available for the general public. Not sure exactly when that'll be, but definitely looking forward to it. You guys have tried this game, right?
Yeah, sounds awesome. It's cool.
Very cool. Like I said, I like the music. It kind of almost reminds you of being at a carnival or something, but it's fun and enjoyable, and the game itself is pretty fun. And like I said, it's a good use of the hardware. Very cool. So,
it is a great game, and it did sound very, very good, and I learned a little bit about the MPI and cartridges. So.
Yeah, we may be talking about that a little bit later. I may be. All right. Well, that's our last news item. So we're going to take another little break, and then we'll be back with some feedback.
If you are a fan of the TRS-80 color computer, then you won't want to miss CoCo, the colorful history of Tandy's underdog computer from CRC Press. Follow the evolution of the color computer from the early beginnings of Project Green Thumb and Videotex terminals to the CoCo 1, MC10, CoCo 2, and CoCo 3. Follow the rise of Rainbow Magazine, Microware, and the CoCo community at large. Get the inside story from Tandy engineers, constantly challenged to reduce cost and increase capability. If you own a CoCo, you should own this book, CoCo, the colorful history of Tandy's underdog computer, written by Boise Pete and Bill LaJudas. Available now at Amazon.com.
Dear Tandy Landers, we have both a TRS-80 Model 3 and Model 4, but they only have floppy disk drives, and one of them is starting to fail. I've been diagnosed with repetitive motion injuries from the hours spent swapping floppy disks back and forth. How can I end this madness and still enjoy my TRS-80? Signed, Wrecked Wrists.
Dear Wrecked Wrists, the answer is simple. You need the FRED, F-R-E-H-D, the TRS-80 hard drive emulator. The FRED stores your operating system and data on an SD card. It plugs easily into your TRS-80 Model 1, 3, or 4 and emulates the Tandy TRS-80 hard disk drive. No more swapping floppies every time you want to run a different program. Create multiple hard drive partitions on an SD card. Programs that run notoriously slow on floppy-based systems will run lightning fast with the FRED hard drive emulator. For information and pricing, contact Ian Maverick via email, ianm@trs-80.com.
Okay, now we're back with some feedback. So our first item is actually I think a couple of months old now. It was in my email, and I think I missed it last month. Sorry about that. But from Jim Gary, of course, we cover items from Jim Gary quite often, but in particular, we covered a game called Soul Chess, SOLCHESS, essentially a solitaire chess game. So here's Jim's quote. I should mention that Soul Chess is a game that recreates a popular board game, solitaire chess, and phone app, which is a puzzle game that some folks might enjoy. My code should be easily ported to CoCo. So, very cool, Jim. And, get on it. Because we know that, Jim is always sitting back on his laurels and never producing anything new. So, no, it did look pretty cool, and it looked like maybe a quarter of a chessboard and some number of chess pieces, and I'm not sure exactly how it's played, but if you're a chess nerd or whatever, it's probably a great way to pass some time. So that was pretty cool. Next item. So some of you may remember during our discussion, I guess it was last month, talking about the hoarding versus collecting. I said something about if I could lay down on my hoard without breaking anything, I would. and made reference to smog. So Mark J. Blair says, quote, apparently I'm a dragon. Your description of smog sounded just like me. So sounds like Mark may have the same kind of problem I've got. Not enough space or not enough will to actually organize the space or somewhere in between. Anyway, well, very cool. It's good to know people are listening and enjoying our commentary. So thanks for writing in, guys. And if you're out there and have something to say, please do send us some feedback, and maybe you can get mentioned on the air as well. Thank you. That's our feedback session for this month.
See music on your color computer with Kaleidophone. The Kaleidophone plugs into the 2 joystick ports of your color computer. Then connect your hi-fi stereo system. The music that your color computer hears is transformed into breathtaking animated graphics on your television. It's great for parties, meditation, and education. Kaleidophone's dedicated hardware lets your color computer devote full time for graphics generation. It continuously delivers 64 volume levels in stereo. Do not confuse Kaleidophone with imitations. The Kaleidophone is really something new. It's only $49.95 fully assembled and includes a detailed instruction booklet. Plus, get a free issue of Kaleidophonics on cassette, our user's newsletter. Each issue contains dozens of new displays and display ideas. The Kaleidophone from New Salem Research, New Salem, Mass.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back for a little treat. We have an interview with a guest. Very exciting. So our guest today is, Michael. I'm going to let you teach me how to say your last name because I'm sure I'm going to mess that up.
Yeah, so Michael Maydaniuk's my name.
Maydaniuk. Okay, that's not too bad. Maydaniuk. Got a couple of extra vowels in there that, scare me. Anyways, so Michael has a collection of videos that he's published on YouTube with the interesting pseudonym of 6809 Coder. I assume that the 6809 references an affinity for a certain processor. So we'll find out more as we go along here. Michael, where do you come from? How long have you been involved with the CoCo? What sparked your interest? If it's later, what are you doing these days?
Yeah, so I'm basically a Radio Shack geek from a Radio Shack family. And so it was kind of like I didn't have much choice in what kind of computer we got, or probably I didn't even have much choice in what sort of career I got into. My dad was a franchisee of Radio Shack in the early 70s. And so he had a couple stores up in the city up here in Canada, in Edmonton. And, that kind of started it. And then he took a break from that for a bit and then came back into it in the 80s. So I pretty much grew up with, Duophone and Realistic and Tandy and TRS-80 and the whole works.
Cool.
Very cool. Very cool. So then, so you ended up working at is your dad's Radio Shack, or just a summer job kind of thing, or was it more of a carry on the family business sort of thing?
It was pretty much carry on the family business by the time I got into it. So I worked just my first job just out of high school, actually. I was at Radio Shack for a few years there. I was a salesperson, and then I was computer sales representative, I think they called it, for a while they had that job. And so, I don't know, I was never a great salesman, but I knew my Radio Shack gear. I knew my series, 26 series and 276 and all that good stuff.
Was there a particular line or product that you enjoyed playing with in the store or anything like that?
Well, probably like as a kid, certainly the computers were the most fun. You could play around with those, and the store would be closed, and you get to hang out, while Dad did inventory or whatever, and I might be on a Model 3 or Model 4, and play Dancing Demon or watch it dance at least, and of course the CoCo, and I got a CoCo for Christmas, and I'm going to say 82, whatever the first year the CoCo 2 came out. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of got me started on my CoCo adventure. So I think I'm probably not a super vocal community member, but I've been involved in the CoCo for a long time.
Cool. So how long have you been doing the YouTube thing?
It's been about 4 years that I've been doing YouTube. It's not consistent. It's, a lot of it is what interests me, and sometimes that doesn't interest the general population, which actually I'm quite thankful it doesn't interest the general population. But sometimes, finding a topic that I want to get into and do a video about, it's not the world's most, consistent thing that I can turn out every week or anything like that. So, like I said, I'm going to say 4 years, and I got about 40 videos up there right now.
Yeah, they're definitely some good videos. I've enjoyed them. I know I just kind of stumbled into them one day, and it was just like, wow, where's this been?
Yeah, definitely cool. Now, do you make them just ad hoc, or just, hey, I've been thinking about this, why don't I make a video? Or do you have any sort of plan for, some sort of series or goals or anything like that?
I think it's a lot like the hobby itself. A lot of things you do on the CoCo, which, obviously I can't explain to my wife why I need to spend a Saturday evening coding on this crazy green screen and, ignore her. But it's more about scratching the itch, right? So I think a good example for me was I did a video on SCS and, all the cartridge signals. And it was kind of like, I didn't understand this, and I wanted to understand this. So I sat and, looked at as many pieces of information I could, looked through the service manuals. I listened to your podcast. I heard you talking about it, John. And I was like, okay, I'm going to understand this, and then I'll explain this on a video. So that's kind of how I go into it. So it's a bit, I'm going to say not well planned as far as a roadmap is concerned, but each video, I tend to spend a few hours at least researching the topic, so I kind of know what I'm talking about when I'm filming.
Yeah.
That's cool. So for an average video, how much preparation do you do specific for a given video, and how much post-production do you do?
It's probably for a half-hour video, you're looking 2 days worth of work, because the post-production takes a long time, and I tend to say and a lot, and you got to get most of those out, and then I'll occasionally you go to listen to your video afterwards, and you go, oh well, I just said something totally wrong, and the YouTube police are going to catch me on that one, so I got to get rid of that fact. So I'm going to say, probably about 8 hours of prep beforehand, reading and researching, and then after that, another 8 hours between filming and post-production.
Wow. That's dedication, folks. Well, we're glad you do that. It's good to have that extra content available, both for as backup reference material for others of us in the media, shall we say, and just as educational stuff for others in the hobby, or even just to inspire other people. It's great to have some stuff out there. It's so weird. I mean, how long has YouTube even existed? 10 years, maybe? It's just amazing how much stuff is out there and how dependent we are sometimes on it.
Really huge for our hobby, I think. So,
no,
Yeah,
definitely.
There is a lot of content, and Michael, your videos come up very easily when you do CoCo searching. My first intro to your stuff was your CoCo 3 motherboard review, and I thought that was really neat. I didn't hear of your name in the community or things like that, so I started looking at some of your other videos and always wondered your background. And you just brought up a video you did, a couple months ago with regards to the color computer cartridge signals, and I thought that was a really good video. It's actually kind of timely because that's something that's interests me as of late to kind of understand that a little bit more. So we definitely appreciate those videos.
Thank you. The way I see it, one of the reasons I find the hobby interesting, the CoCo in particular interesting, is that in a modern computer, there's no way you can understand the whole machine. You might be an expert in, I mean, you can't even understand a whole video card at this point. It's so complicated. Whereas in the CoCo, you can kind of become an expert in the hardware and all the software, the ROM images, and the available software and what the best games are, and then you really get into it. You might get into OS 9 and spend your weekends doing that. My videos, that's part of it too, is really understanding, and I mean, it's not for everyone because the entertainment factor is not there. I try not to blow up my computers, although I seem to do it more often than not. But I like to get into the details, and there's a group of people who are interested in that, and that's kind of the group that I'm making my videos for.
Now, I've got to ask you about your test gear because you've got some really nice test equipment that you show there. Is that just for your hobby, or is that related to your day job?
No, my day job's in software, so part of it is the fact that I spent most of my career working in abstract things, having that physical, something physical for my hobby, I find interesting, and I actually started the test gear collection because I was going to do an alignment on an old shortwave radio, a realistic shortwave radio, of course. And so I was looking on eBay and I'm going, oh, this would be cool. A counter. I need a frequency counter. That would be great. And then I got it, and then I got a frequency generator, and then I found actually that I enjoyed just tinkering with the test gear a lot more than I enjoyed repairing things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like if you've got 14 multi-pack interfaces, it's kind of you collect them. So that's a lot of what I do with it. And yeah, I do legitimate repairs with it, but it's mostly the equipment is neat and it's fun to learn.
And sometimes it's hard to just sit down and enjoy the hobby, right? So it's cool to just be able to sit in your room and play with your stuff like a little kid.
Pretty much. And this equipment, if I think back to the 80s, what a home user could afford, there's no way I could afford a rack mount frequency generator. So part of it is scratching that itch and going, well, I can afford this stuff now, and it's really cheap comparatively, so let's do it. Let's, do what I want to do as a kid.
Michael, is that color computer equipment that you have, your CoCo 3, is that original stuff you had as a kid, or is this stuff that you acquired, afterwards?
I actually have the motherboard from the CoCo that I had as a kid. And there's sort of an interesting story about it in that as I was getting out of the CoCo, one day, my parents came home with a Tandy 1000, and that was like the slick machine and lots more video games and stuff like that. So I ended up going that MS-DOS route in, I'd say 1988. But my CoCo, I ended up, I think I sold it to a buddy of mine. I don't think I gave it away. I think I sold it. And he had it for, I don't know, 8 years. And one day I'm at his house and the CoCo is sitting there on the ground. The power cord's been cut off because, he needed a power cord for something. And, the ultimate indignity done to this poor thing. And I said, "Oh, you're never going to use that again, are you?" And he's like, "No, I'm just going to chuck it out." So I took it and I rescued it. And then I actually did a repack on it and put it into a PC tower case. And I ended up bringing that PC tower over to Germany for 4 years when I was working and living there. And so I have my CoCo with me, and it's a well-traveled machine. Brought it back, and all the floppy disks that I had, they all worked when I tested them last, which wasn't too long ago. But brought it back 4 years later, and then I'm going to say, actually, I got a video on some of the repair stuff. I'm going to say about 3-4 years ago, I was repacking it again, and I connected the power supply up wrong, and I blew it up. So I still got the board. It just doesn't work. The gimme's blown on it. So I'm really waiting for, I guess, Zipster's got a gimme project. I'm really, I got a big order prepared for him when that project's done.
Well, I imagine you're not the only one.
Yeah.
Do you have a CoCo buddy or anything? Do you have anybody local or maybe not even local but somebody you interact with? And if not, have you ever considered making the trip out to CoCo Fest?
Well, I do have a CoCo buddy, but that doesn't exclude me going to CoCo Fest at some point. I'm not sure if it's going to happen this year. It is quite a trek from the West Coast to get out there. But I'm not sure if it's the last CoCo Fest or not this time. But I've been seeing it since like 2001 or something like that, and it hasn't ended yet. But I figure I'll try to make it out in the next couple of years.
Well, that'd be cool. Definitely, I'm sure everybody would be glad to see you.
Do you make it to any shows that are closer to you, like the VCF shows, or?
I haven't been to any shows at all in the retro computing space. I think retro computing has kind of taken off in the last 4 or 5 years.
Oh yeah.
But I haven't been part of it, unfortunately. But you never know.
Well, there's some good shows up there around Portland, and there's of course the nice museum there in
Seattle.
Seattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You got to spend time with real people sometimes. Maybe they're normal people, or maybe they're geeky people. But once in a while.
Michael, it's got to get away from the OS 9 prompt.
Yeah, it's not
from the green glowing screen.
Yes, it's not too late. My first show was the 25th annual CoCo Fest, in big part to the podcast that John and Mike are doing. And I lived within 50 minutes of that show for years. And I'm very glad I went and got to meet a lot of people. And, now I make it a point to attend that. And, of course, Tandy Assembly just started last year. That would be further for you, obviously. But if there's any way, we don't know how long it's going to go, John. I know you guys joke about it all the time, but hopefully you can make it out here in the next year or two.
Well, like I say, you never know how long it'll go. I'd be surprised if it doesn't go at least a couple more years, but you never can tell for sure.
Yep.
I don't know. What have you got in store for us in the near future here, Michael? You got any cool videos under wraps or in the works?
Sure. Yeah, I got a couple of projects underway. So my videos are gonna chug along. I think my next one is probably not CoCo related. I'm gonna do a bit of a review on some old gear, but I want to explore the memory subsystem of the CoCo a bit in detail.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of my next video that I want to do. It's interesting. first off, the way RAM works versus ROM is quite interesting. And then also, how the CoCo engineers and also, guys like Tony DiStefano, when they built the Disto 2 meg, figure out how to get, more than 64K accessible by the machine. So I figured that would warrant an in-depth video. Yeah, other than that, I've got a couple of projects. So I'm kind of, I've been getting deep into OS 9 recently and kind of getting the lay of the land. And it's quite interesting that OS 9 itself is, 30 years ago, it was something very mysterious and foreign. But now, having spent most of my career in a Linux environment, it's kind of like I look at it and I say, oh, this is Unix from the 70s pretty much,
Yeah.
So I've been playing around with that, and I'm actually trying to do, and there's a bit of overlap in products that already exist, but I'm trying to do a VI clone, something that will work over a remote terminal. So I guess TS Edit is already a VI clone, but doesn't work if you're, well, as far as I know, it doesn't work over a remote terminal, which I'm kind of used to my big keyboard and big screen and stuff like that. So I really want to be able to edit files and edit code remotely. So that's kind of my big project at the moment.
Sure.
And,
Yeah. Keep us posted on that. I mean, I'm definitely a VI fan. I'm sure John is too.
Mm-hmm.
But and I used to use a VT220, with Dynacalc on my CoCo 3. So it was definitely an improvement.
Perfect. You guys have mentioned on the podcast that there's a lot of hardware coming out, and that's fun. But there's some games coming out and stuff, but there's not a lot of software. And I figure, well, we've got tools like CMOC. If you have a Linux box built with a nice build system and the I guess the Docker image that Jamie Cho built, it's pretty easy to code some software. So I figured I'd contribute in that way.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, I don't want to discourage anyone from doing hardware if that's what the itch they have or whatever. But, if you are somebody who's interested in both software and hardware, we could probably use the software more than the hardware right now. So
yeah,
that's
we got a lot of Maseratis and no gasoline.
Yeah. Lucky if we got oil.
Yeah, and sort of the other project I got going is I've got some BBS software that me and my buddy I mentioned who had the CoCo on the ground, we coded back in 1987, and I'm trying to get that the last bits of it finished off, and I'll put it up, and if someone dials in, that's fun. No one dials in, well, I got a spare CoCo sitting around, so might as well get it to do something. I can dial in.
That's cool.
What do you think about the reverse interview here? What do you think about the size of the CoCo community now? I was pretty shocked to see. I think there's over 2,000 people on the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And it's pretty shocked to see like the activity, the level of activity that we have. It's quite good.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the community and level of activity. And even the seemingly the size, as best as we can detect it, I think we've always had kind of an inferiority complex when we compare ourselves to the Commodore 64 crowd or the Apple II crowd or anything else really. But and who knows, that may have been accurate back then, but these days, for some reason, the CoCo seems to be the one that's brought people home. And so, like you said, we got a couple of thousand people on the Facebook group. The truth is, basically every one of our episodes gets more than that many downloads, sometimes quite a bit more. So now those might not all be CoCo people. They might be general kind of retro people. And they're certainly welcome to download and listen. But still, if you are drawing that much, so a lot of those people are bound to have a CoCo somewhere, right? So pretty strong community. And we've got our show, we've got the CoCo Talk show that is drawing in people. We have CoCo Fest, and we've got Tandy Assembly that's drawing actual warm bodies to to physical locations. Like I said, there's even we complain about too much hardware, or maybe not too much, but a mismatch. But we have plenty of software in the pipeline too. You see people posting about their games or whatever, and we know about a few games in the works from people who want to put them on cartridge, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a lot of activity. It's hard to complain when you think about how old of a machine we're talking about. It's pretty healthy. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I think one of the things about the CoCo community is that, certainly as a kid, we did have that inferiority complex. For our friends all had Commodore 64s, had Apple IIs, but a lot of those guys who had Commodore 64s and Apple IIs, they spent their time playing video games, and they never really got into the meat of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things a lot of the CoCo people did, like certainly myself, is get a Rainbow magazine, which was pretty exceptional to have this thick magazine full of content for your computer. Spend, a weekend typing in, I don't know, Space War 2000 with the great graphics, and they always had this beautiful picture of like rockets and spaceships, and then type the whole thing in, and then, you fix all the syntax errors, and then you get it, and it's like a bunch of blocks on the screen, and you have to really use your imagination that it's a spaceship. But
those drawings, the illustrations in the magazine should have said artist rendition, something that
But
exactly as pictured.
Yeah, and as we look at the CoCo, I mean, you think about that envy you may have had with your friends that had the Commodore 64s, not from the processor standpoint, but from all the games and the Ataris. I mean, the CoCo now, today, when you look back, I mean, not only does it hold its own, it actually seems so much better now. I mean, within a relatively short amount of years, people like Sockmaster coming out with their Donkey Kong and DK Remix, and Glenn Hewitt doing his transcodes of Defender he's working on now, and Pac-Man, and I mean, you think about what the color computer can do, and that's without enhanced hardware. That's running on a pretty much stock CoCo 3. That would be unheard of back then, and today, it's just amazing to me what we're still extracting from this machine. It's just so impressive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as in my real life world or whatever. People know that I have this hobby. It's not a secret, and enough people know about it that people will approach me at conferences, or maybe people that work at the same place but wouldn't otherwise directly know me. But they'll come and say, "Oh yeah, I do kind of the same thing," and then they'll say, they'll tell me what machine they favor or whatever, and you hit plenty of people who say, well, I've got a Commodore 64, or I've got an Atari, or I've got a ZX Spectrum or whatever. But I've always been a little surprised at how many of them say, oh, yeah, I got my start with a Tandy color computer, and, I love that thing, and the BASIC was so good and whatever. And so I do wonder, like I said, I'm sure there's plenty of people of a certain age that got their start on the Commodore 64 or the Apple II or whatever. But I do wonder, percentage-wise, what if the CoCo doesn't punch above its weight in terms of how many computing careers got started. It seems like it from my own anecdotal experience that maybe there's a few more than you'd expect.
Yeah, I really think so. I mean, the CoCo was a bit of a, in a way, it was the forced programmer's machine. If you wanted to do something with it, you pretty much were forced to code something. And, a lot of, like the BBSs were full of Commodore wares, all those great games. You couldn't even pirate a lot of the stuff on the CoCo. Just it wasn't available.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it's a frustrating thing or if it's good in the long run, but I think that Tandy marketing was weird, to say the least. Because if you compare the Model 4 and its capabilities with the CoCo, I mean, the only thing nominally better about the Model 4 is the clock speed's higher. It doesn't, not necessarily faster, but it's got a better sounding number for the marketing team. But never marketed the CoCo. They could have taken the platform and turned it into a business machine with one. They could have they could have pushed it. They could have done all sorts of stuff. Hey, here's this machine that's nice and cheap. You can get into it. And by the way, we've got this random Unix multitasking, multi-user operating system over in a package on the wall here. Mm-hmm. But they really, the marketing was just was strange, to say the least. So.
Well, what else? I mean, what have we not asked you that you thought maybe we would?
I've got certainly got my views on where the CoCo is strong these days as far as development is concerned. Mm-hmm. I think that CMOC, what Pierre's done, is fantastic. It's great to have like a C compiler that works. And I think that that's going to be, as more people start to use it, I think that's going to be the future of a lot of the growth that we see in the CoCo. It's just a simple, easy to use C compiler that works properly. Assembly language itself is great, obviously, but you need a different mindset to do it. And mm-hmm. I think that we have a lot of really talented people working in BASIC, and they could get into use CMOC without it being a complete shift in their brain of how they have to work with the CoCo. So I see that as a real big opportunity that we have in the CoCo, and I like to see that it's got really good RS-DOS support, and the OS 9 support seems to be getting better. So I just think that's where we're going to see some real growth in the next couple of years.
Michael, thank you for the interview. It's great talking to you. Great to having you as part of the community, and definitely appreciate the work you're doing on YouTube. And all good stuff. So appreciate you being on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity.
It's spooktacular savings on scary games at your local Radio Shack dealer. Save up to 50% on best-selling titles such as 13 Ghosts, Bedlam, Dancing Demon, Haunted House, Dungeons of Daggerath. These games are sure to please you and your family as you hand out candy to anyone who knocks at your door. It's a happy Halloween from Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
What's going on, CoCo Cruisers? The original gamer Stevie Stroh here, and I'm the host of CoCo Talk. What is CoCo Talk, you ask? Well, we are a weekly live talk show on YouTube featuring the Tandy Color computer. And guess what? CoCo Talk is now also available as an audio podcast for your listening pleasure. So when you are done listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, come check us out at cocotalk.live for weekly live talk featuring the Tandy Color computer. We'll see you there, CoCo Cruisers.
Back to more retro goodness with the CoCo Crew.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome back for the contentious host discussion. Hopefully this will be a fun part of the show. Actually, I haven't really polled the participants too much, so I'm not really sure who's going to come out where on this. As any of you that have been listening for much time to the podcast know, there is a popular upgrade that can be performed on the 6809-based color computers, and that is to replace the 6809 with a Hitachi 6309 chip, which was originally marketed as a 100% compatible replacement. And then it turned out, after it had been on the market a little bit, the Hitachi folks admitted that they had implemented something a little bit different and had extended the instruction set and done things a little bit differently, made the processor able to execute a number of instructions more quickly, that sort of thing. being able to exercise this chip was actually the original motivation for turning what was OS 9 into what became Nitrous 9, and so upgrading CoCos with 6309 processors has been a popular thing to do for the past 20 years. But traditionally, it was something that generally was only done, I think, on CoCo 3s, and was certainly mostly done for the purpose of running Nitrous 9. And so because of the whole Deck B versus Nitrous 9 or OS 9 supposed community fracture or whatever you want to call it, it was sort of a Nitrous 9 thing to do, and definitely kind of a CoCo 3 thing to do, because if you're going to run Nitrous 9, you want to run it on, the hottest machine you can. But in more recent times, past year or two, more people have been putting 6309s into CoCo 2s, or even, I don't know, maybe even CoCo 1s. Whether or not you're putting them in CoCo 1s or 2s, the perception is that there's more people with 309s, even in the CoCo 3s now, than used to be. And given all that, the point of the discussion here is some, shall we say, prominent CoCo game developers are starting to say that they're only going to produce, or they're going to produce games that are specifically for the 6309. And not just some earlier games have detected the 6309 and maybe taken advantage of them if they were available, maybe had a few special features here and there. This is a little bit different in that they'd actually require the 6309 to work at all. So, the question that I offer to the group here is this a good idea? Is this good marketing? Is the CoCo community so full of 6309s, at least amongst the population that will buy software or that wants to run new software, that the benefits of running with a 6309 outweigh the fact that you're cutting off a certain amount of the community?
I have a few comments. It's going to be interesting to see if something like this drives the installation of 6309s into CoCos that don't have a more, or if this will limit the sales of the product. I'm very curious to see which way that's going to go. From a CoCo 3 standpoint, I don't necessarily think the 6309's a bad upgrade, especially if you're interested in running Nitrous 9 or things like that. When it comes to the CoCo 1 and 2, I don't know. I guess if you have a bad CPU and you need to replace it, maybe it makes sense because of power and the heat benefits, the temperature saving benefits you may get from it. But one of the things I keep thinking of when I look at games that other people have made, like Sockmaster and his Donkey Kong remix, one of the big bragging points about that game is it does run on a 6809. That's the original processor that was in the CoCo 3, and that game holds its own and even better against any other Donkey Kong port you've seen on any of these older 8-bit home computers. When you start looking at the 6309, and maybe people don't care about that, it's probably just a minor thing, but when you start to look at games that maybe just take advantage of the 6309, you can still brag that it's an excellent game, if it is, but you can no longer say it's using that original processor in the computer. That could just be a minor thing. So those are just kind of my thoughts on it.
And the other thing to add to that, Ron, is that Donkey Kong remix also uses a 6309. It detects if it's there, so it'll run faster with better frame rate. So he's actually programmed that to run with both CPUs.
Right. But I guess, like John had mentioned, you got the option. You're not locked into a 6309. And again, Not that that's a bad thing. It's just, when you go to these shows and things like that, and you see people that may demo Donkey Kong Remix, it's like, that can run on a 6809, which is a great processor anyway. We probably already have an advantage just because of that, but.
Right.
But yeah, going back to the original point, is this going to drive sales of 6309s more, or is this going to limit the sale of the game? It'll be very interesting to see.
In terms of driving sales of the chip upgrade, I don't know, you'd have to have a pretty amazing game, I think, for that to happen. Of course, I mean, plenty of people might upgrade anyway, so it could just be an excuse. Oh, the new, whatever it's called, Gunstar or whatever is going to come out. It could be an excuse. Well, I was going to get my CPU upgraded anyway. Might as well go ahead and do it now. So, that's certainly something that could happen. I don't know if we have any good numbers on how many people actually have the chips installed. I have machines that are upgraded. I have machines that are not upgraded. I've been around, in the community for a long time too. I remember at some one point, it was not so long ago, that it was a little bit, maybe not terribly hard, but a little bit hard to find the 6309s. Not too long ago, there was other people saying that it was easier to find 6309s than 6809s, which I'm not sure that's true now. I'm not sure if it was true then, but that was a claim for a while. I don't know. You mentioned in terms of sort of almost like a fairness kind of thing. It's like, well, if you're upgrading the processor, how much upgrade to the processor is too much? If you could take an ARM processor and have it boot up in 6809 mode, running an emulator or something. If you could plug that onto your CoCo, and then as it boots up running CoCo Basic or whatever, Color Basic, you could then poke 64932, 5, something like that. And then suddenly you're running, 32 or 64-bit ARM code. Would it be interesting if you could then write an ARM-based program that runs on your CoCo? I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't think I'd be too interested, but I can see where some people would be. Now, it's kind of an extreme example, but when we were in our pre-show, I think Boise was mentioning, well, just take a different kind of upgrade. Say if you wrote a game that required a 2 meg or 8 meg memory upgrade, is that good marketing? You're certainly cutting off part of your potential customer base. But if you can make good use of that extra memory, well, then the graphics would probably be, a lot more appealing, and the audio or whatever. I guess it just sort of depends.
I think you're right from the marketing standpoint. It's good marketing if you make money replacing 6809s with 6309s.
Right.
If you provide that service. I mean, absolutely. There's nothing wrong. I think it's fine if somebody wants to develop games that will only run on the 6309. But yeah, not everybody's going to do that. I would say the majority of people aren't going to do that. A lot of CoCo 3 owners probably have a 6309 if they run Nitrous 9, but probably not the majority of them for sure. So, I can release video on Beta Max, and some people will get that, but the majority of people are going to be on VHS.
Oh, man, I just gave up my Beta.
That's right, you did. So, I mean, yeah, everybody should do their thing. What are the speed differences there? You really got to be pushing it. And you probably are pushing it if you're doing music with a processor instead of using something like a GMC, for example. You can probably save you boatloads of CPU just doing that, whether you were 6309 or not. So, I guess it just depends on what you want to do. And, yeah, there will be some people that update just to run that game, and I don't see anything wrong with that if that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
But it does shrink the market to that. But if people are wanting to push the envelope with that and take advantage of the instructions that the 6309, you may be able to pull off a game that you just can't quite do on the 6809. But obviously, just like we talked about, like with Donkey Kong, having the ability to run, just like Nitrous 9 will run on a 6809 or a 6309. So,
yeah, I don't know. It's like how much more are you enabling? Unless you're totally pushing it all the way to the limit, then it seems like you're risking the criticism that, well, you could have just done that with the plain 6809. You know what I mean? And then how does anybody know exactly where that limit was? I mean, take your word for it, I guess. But it's hard to know. It's hard to know the numbers of these things. I mean, we don't have any idea really how many people have 6309s many had them from the past, how many have had the upgrades in the past couple of years when there's been an active seller kind of pushing them. I don't know, like another upgrade, that is popular in the community these days, a CoCo SDC, right? We heard this week, wasn't in our news segment, but I heard Ed Snyder assert that he has sold over 700, working on 800 CoCo SDCs. On the one hand, that sounds pretty impressive, right? And a lot of people have CoCo SDCs, and you think, well, if there's a reason to develop a game that required CoCo SDC, maybe that'd be okay, right? 800 of them out there. And that probably dwarfs the number of people that have 6309s, for example. That'd be my guess. But even if you had 800, right? Well, 800, that's probably a third or less than the number of downloads that this episode of CoCo Crew will eventually get. So you're at most reaching a third of our audience, right? And we probably don't even cover all of the CoCo community. So, if you could only reach a third of the community, is that really what you should be targeting? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I guess it depends on what your purpose is. And if you just want to be the talk of the CoCo talk shows, then sure, it doesn't matter, right? And whatever you put out, we're going to talk about it. But if you really want to reach the whole community, then probably don't want to target even a very popular upgrade. So I guess that's what it comes down to. What itch are you trying to scratch? What's your point?
I was just going to say, I mean, definitely it's absolutely a personal itch. It's not about the community, and it doesn't really have to be either. But I mean, if you look at it in those terms, it's not, the majority of the community is not going to jump on that.
So the point of having a 6309 is to champion the nature of the chip, right? The better instructions, the faster execution of those instructions, and the like. And I would like to see more games that exercise the chip and its capabilities. But ironically, in order to measure that performance, you have to have, I think, the game running on the 6809 as well. So I would be more inclined to want to play a game that had both the 6309 and the 6809 implementation. And from a technical point of view, just to see how the game is faster or better, right? But the problem there is that it takes a lot of effort to develop a piece of software on both, because you have to optimize for the 6309 when you can. It takes some effort. And this obviously was seen with the Nitrous 9 project.
Yeah.
What we did is we backported, essentially, Nitrous 9, which was 6309, only did 6809, in a game where you've got a lot of different moving parts and things. It's even more critical, I think, and difficult than just an operating system, because you're really focused on performance, and it really shows. So I don't know. I'm of two minds on this. I would like to see more 6309-ish games, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to abandon the 6809 as a platform for any game. I don't think it's a game changer, if you will, just to focus on the 6309, because there are always going to be CoCos out there with 6809s, CoCo 2s and CoCo 3s. And I don't know what the supply of 6309s are right now, in terms of if there exists 6309s that can be put into every CoCo that's ever been sold. I don't know. But anyway, that's my take on it. I'm just kind of mixed with it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a good point. There is, obviously, clearly there's a certain similarity between the architectures of the 6809 and 6309, or else the 6309 wouldn't be able to, so easily emulate the 6809. But still, the 6309 is its own beast. It's its own, it has its own set of registers, its own extra instructions. And if you're going to optimize a game, if you're not going to optimize for the processor, then what's the point, right? And if it is enough of a game to need optimization, then you're going to have to optimize it for the 6309 in ways that don't necessarily have a corresponding version for the 6809, which I guess the point I'm trying to make is that, maybe that pushes you farther towards if you want to support 6309, then maybe you're that much farther away. You just, out of practical concerns, you just have to go full 6309 and not worry about the 6809. And again, like Mike was saying, I mean, you're writing the code. It's your game. Do what you want. We're just here to talk about it. So, that's how we get people to listen. So we're going to talk about it. That doesn't mean we're saying, even if we don't think it's what we would do, that doesn't mean that we're telling you not to do it. So do what you want. I guess I would prefer, it's kind of a community thing we're in here, right? And we're all at least partly, listening to, making these shows and listening to these shows, going to CoCo Fest and whatever, going to Tandy Assembly, to kind of be part of a community, kind of have a shared experience or share some touchstones or whatever. And so when you're going to bring out a new game, we all want to be able to play it. If you're going to cut out half the community, then half the community is not going to be able to play it. Now, on the other hand, I'm looking around the room and I see more CoCos than I have fingers. And at least one or two of them have 6809s. So even if not every CoCo has one, that doesn't mean I can't scratch one up. Who knows? Why not? Make a game that requires 6309. Make a game that, make some games that don't. Make a game that requires a 2 meg upgrade. Make a game that requires the 16 meg upgrade from Paul Barton. Whatever works for you. I guess after I've heard for 2 years now about how, well, if you make a game that uses that sound chip, not just everybody's got that sound chip. How's that going to work? It's like, well, the sound chip's going to be on the cartridge. But people didn't seem to accept that as a good enough explanation. So I guess I'm just back to we don't always have to be reasonable. Right? But no, that make a game that requires a sound chip because it makes your game better to use a sound chip. If it makes your game better to use a 6309, if you have a great, maybe that's it. This is man law right here. I'm going to pronounce it. If your game is so awesome that you can't do it with a 6809, but you can with a 6309, then by all means do it that way. Yeah. And we will be happy to see your awesome 6309 game, and you use it 6309 because it was that extra bit better that you had to have it.
And I'm sure there are games that would fall into that category.
There's bound to be, right? And whether it's playing 4-channel music totally synthesized in software, or it's blasting 150 sprites on the screen at the same time, or whatever it is, there's going to be a line, right? There's some level of performance that the 6809 will be able to hit, or the 6309 will be able to hit that the 6809 couldn't quite get there. There's some line that will be between them. That may not be that far apart in the grand scheme of things. You're talking about, 10, 20%, whatever. But, if you're doing your code in the right way that the 6309 gets the edge, then that's what you'll have to do.
While you're at it, do one that supports the GMC with the 6309.
Well, there you go. Well, that would give you awesome music, the fastest processor. You'd have potentially a very big game because you could have the bank switch ROM in there. And if your game is that awesome, then having to charge, $30 or $40 for it should not be a big deal to anybody.
The one last thing I want to get in here before we take this to a close is I just have to say this. If anybody is planning on upgrading their CoCo 3s to a 6309 and you're not experienced at soldering, do not chance this on your own.
Yeah.
I've seen too many bad motherboards out there, and they're, you hate to ruin a board.
You will mess it up very badly if you're not careful, if you're not experienced,
Yes.
and almost to the point of having to chuck them in the trash. And so they're not making any more of those boards. They're not making any more of pretty much any of it, but there's still a supply of everything else. But there's no.
That's right.
There's not really a supply of unused boards. So at least not until Ed Snyder decides to clone them or something. So, all right. Well, have we beat this one to death?
It's laying on the floor and it's shaking.
It's shaking. His eyes are rolled back into his head. Yeah, pulsing. All right. Well, I'll slit his throat and be done with it. All right. Well, thank you all, gentlemen, for a lovely discussion, and I'd love to hear your opinions. Listeners, surely there's some opinions to be had from you guys on what we've said here and how dumb some of us are for thinking what we think, or how brilliant some of us may be for thinking what we think. Either way, send us some feedback at cococrew.org or one of the other addresses from the beginning of the show. Rewind if you have to. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to take another little break, and we'll be back with the rest.
So let's keep it quiet. So what have you been up to lately? Oh man, I've been having a blast with my TRS-80 Model 3 and 4. What's making it so fun? I've added the M3 SE from Bartlett Labs. What's that? It's the Model 3 System Expander. It gives you solid-state hard drives on compact flash, Ethernet, a real-time clock, and you can connect an SVGA monitor. That's incredible! It also has an Atari 2600 compatible joystick port. You can play games like never before. Wow! Sorry. It works with the Model 3, 4, 4D, and 4P. The 4P can even automatically boot from a hard drive image. Where can I get one? Get carried away with your TRS-80 Model 3 or 4 with the Model 3 System Expander. Visit bartlettlabs.com for details and pricing.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome to the tech segment for CoCo Crew episode 41. Wow, 41. That's a lot of episodes. All right, well, today we are going to talk a bit about selecting different active slots in software for the multi-pack interface. You know, looking back, I'm not even sure we've ever really covered the multi-pack interface in the tech segment. Would have thought I'd have done that earlier on. Maybe I did and just can't find it. But but basically, I mean, I know we did cover the CoCo's 40-pin slot, and you know, where you plug in program packs and such. And you know, that's good background information, but that's not quite all there is to it when it comes to the multi-pack. The reason why this topic kind of comes up is I know we mentioned in the news segment that Steve Bamford is working on his Kuruki Noshima, also known as Cersei's Island game. And Cersei's Island uses the Game Master cartridge for audio. So it's using the SN76489 for the audio, and that is mapped or accessed using the spare cartridge select signal on the CoCo, which means it's mapped in the address range starting at hex FF40. Steve is using one of the emulators, maybe XROAR, to do his development. And, you know, like I said, he's done a good job, but he wanted to be sure that the music that sounded all right on the emulator also sounded good on the real hardware, which apparently he does not have. So he sent us the image of this code and asked if we could test on real hardware. I said fine, but I didn't have anything set up at the moment. I passed it around to some of the other CoCo Crew hosts and that do have the hardware, and the results were it was a little comical, really, that all these CoCo experts, but we had a little trouble getting the settings correct on how to enable this game to work that uses that cartridge hardware without booting out of the cartridge itself. And it's not magic, it's just a matter of really knowing everything that's going on. And well, anyway, it sort of suggested that maybe it's something we all should review or it would be worth discussing on the podcast. So, just for review, the CoCo cartridge port is, it's a single slot by default, right? It's designed to plug in one thing, but, it's a single slot, you can only plug in one thing, but when the signals there are really a bus. They have a couple of extra signals for address decoding. Almost right off the bat, they suggested you could plug more than one thing in, and eventually Tandy came through with what they call the multi-pack interface. There were some other similar devices that came out, well, including a Y cable, which is literally just is a bus. There were some other stuff that essentially copied the interface of the multi-pack in terms of being able to do the software selection or whatever. And then in more recent times, Ed Snyder has done his original mini MPI, two slot, which is basically it had a 2 slot and it's going to come out with a 4 slot. Jim Brain has one that's 4 slots and can do as many as 8. What is the limit, actually? Well, so using the interface as designed, you actually could go out to about 16 slots, which is even David Ladd would have trouble filling all those out. But the MPI per se, it isn't really just a plain old bus, and by that I mean not every slot has access to the exact same set of signals at any one time. Whereas, you could, if you do plug in a Y cable, all the signals go to all the devices, and so you have to make sure that they're addressed in a certain way, or at least not overlapping. Obviously any hardware devices can't be overlapping, so may want to strike that a little bit. But so the addressing in the cartridge slot, there's 2 kind of preordained signals. So there's a cartridge select signal that selects the hexadecimal C000 range for a 16K range that is intended for use for memory mapped devices like a ROM. And this is where program storage goes in a typical program pack, or even a program like on the Deluxe RS-232 pack or something like that. Then the other signal is called the SCS, or Spare Cartridge Select, and that maps out for I guess it's a 16 byte range, or is it 32? Maybe 32 bytes at hexadecimal FF40, and that is kind of intended for hardware access, and so for example, the floppy controller uses that range. For most of the normal hardware on the CoCo, the floppy is really the only thing there, but it can be convenient, especially for a special purpose device like what the Game Master cartridge is designed to be. A game cartridge. It's really designed to be the only thing plugged in, so it uses that hardware range for the audio chip. Since the multi-pack allows you to plug multiple things in, if you just had all the wires going everywhere, if you have devices that do all the full address decoding themselves, like many devices do, they can just select a different range, FF80 or, I don't know what, that's probably not even available, but they can select a different range and they'll work fine, right, as long as they don't overlap. But if you do have devices that conflict, like multiple ROM cartridges, you want to be able to route those signals to particular slots. So, of course, the most obvious way to do this with an MPI is, everything's turned off. You select the switch on the front of the MPI to the slot you want to use, kind of basically, effectively having just that slot plugged in, or, not quite, but close enough, right? As if you only had that one slot plugged in, literally switching to a different slot. And that's probably good, for plenty of things. And if you wanted to plug in 4 ROM packs or whatever, sure, that works fine. In many cases, or in some cases at least, you may want to be able to software select to a different slot. And this is maybe not the nicest way to have to do things, but talking about early to mid 80s technology, it's a perfectly acceptable way to do things back in the day. But again, you're talking about having to poke something in memory to select a register to point at the slots that you wanted to do, right? So now you might think you just would go to a certain location, and specifically the location that's reserved for this is it's a hexadecimal FF7F, or it's a decimal 65407. And you might think you just would go to that number and go to that address and poke a specific slot for a specific number for a specific slot, and just be done. Well, that's close, but not quite right. It turns out that there's actually, you write the 1 byte out there, but you actually have, you sort of have to divide that byte into separate halves. One half selects the where the cartridge select goes, the ROM select, and one part of the byte selects where the spare cartridge select goes, or the device address. Just to confuse things a little bit, the markings on the MPI indicate the slot numbers as starting from 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4. But the values for each slot that you want to poke out there actually start from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. That's not that unusual, but it's something to remember, right? And so when the guys were trying to run Cersei's Island, and I didn't have mine up, and I was just saying, well, you just have to poke out to FF7F with the value of the slot that you wanted, that you have your CoCo GMC or Game Master cartridge plugged into, and that should be fine, right? And they would do that and say, well, we'll do that, and it immediately crashes. I said, what in the world? How is that possible, right? Well, so after several reports of this where, I did secretly suspect that they were just typing something wrong, but I looked and said, oh, you know what, there's that off by 1 thing. So if you're in slot 2 on the, as far as the markings on the outside, then you need to poke a value of 1 for slot 1. Well, okay, that's part of it. There's 2 selects out there. And if you only poke, a value like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, you still are really poking 2 values. It's just you're poking a 0 for the other value. And so, if you don't know how to count in binary, this may be a little confusing to you. You might think of it, well, I'm just to say in binary, and then you can feel free to send some feedback, and if we need to do some binary classes or something. But basically, you have 8 bits in a binary byte, right? And but in this case, you take 4 of those bits, and the low order 4 bits, so the ones that represent values from 0 to 15, those 4 bits select the hardware select, the spare cartridge select. And so when I was telling them to write out, the slot number or whatever, that's fine. But then the other 4 bits, the ones that select values, by themselves would represent values from 16 to 255, plus whatever you've put in the lower 4 bits. Then if you only write a single value that's from 0 to 15, you're putting a 0 in that upper value. That upper value is selecting the ROM select, the CTS, cartridge select signal. That's saying, so basically, you write out, say a 2 for slot 3, And what you're really saying is we'll put SCS on slot 3, or on slot 3, but you're saying put the CTS on the slot 0 or slot 1. And since typically if you have a multi-pack selected, you're going to be booting up either from your floppy controller, or maybe your CoCo SDC would be in slot 4, or maybe it's your CoCo SDC's in slot 3 with the floppy controller in slot 4. Either way, you didn't really boot up with running out of slot 1. If you do your poke you write your poke out, and it switches that ROM select to a different, it's a different ROM, or maybe no ROM at all, depending on what you've got in that first slot. And so, of course, it would crash. So they took me longer than I'd like to admit to think of that, but because I didn't have my hardware up, and I was trying to guide the other guys, and eventually I figured it out. So, of course, you just have to poke in a different value that represents the slot that you've actually booted out of. So, for example, if you boot it up with say CoCo SDC, and let's say you got your floppy controller plugged in too, and so you've left that in slot 4, and you put your CoCo SDC in slot 3, and then you boot up a program that's really that intends to use the GMC, and you've got your GMC plugged into, say, slot 2. Again, so you boot it up in slot 3. You want to run a program that uses the GMC in slot 2. So remember, those numbers are offset by 1 versus the binary values. And so the bottom 4 bits are going to point at slot 2, but the value is really 1. And then those higher 4 bits are going to point at slot 3, but their value is really 2. So the 2 shifted up those 4 bits becomes a value of 32, plus you're going to put a 1 in there for slot 2 for the lower bits, so you get a 32 plus 1, so the value that you need to poke in is actually 33. And so you poke that 33 in. Now you're still running out of the cartridge ROM for your CoCo SDC, so at least you survive that command. Your program, when your program runs and it accesses that FF40 address, or the address range, it's going to go out to slot 2 instead of the slot 3. So there's one more little trap fall for you. So say you have Cersei's Island on a bin file, and you've got it on your CoCo SDC, and you boot that up. Well, if you go with your CoCo SDC and you do this poke for the slot arrangement first, and then you try to load the program, well, it's not going to work because the CoCo SDC is going to be using that FF40 address that you just sent to a different slot. So, of course, what you have to do is first load your program, but before you do your exec, then you'll do your poke that sets the slot correctly, and then you can do your exec. And so then when Cersei's Island comes up and accesses that FF40 range, it'll go to the proper slot, and you'll be fine. And then if you do happen, I'm not sure if there's a convenient exit from Cersei's Island, since it's really supposed to be a ROM cartridge, but whatever the program is, say you were developing your own thing, if you did exit that program, then you'd need to do another poke to put it back to point at the slot where your CoCo SDC is running, and then you'd be able to go on your merry way. So I guess that was probably a lot of waving of hands and a little confusing, and a whole lot of numbers and a whole lot of, well, you want 3, but you got to use 2 or whatever. Hopefully that's not all too confusing. But the point being is there are 2 things to consider when you do a software slot select on the MPI, and where you want to point your ROM versus where you want to point your hardware select is going to depend a bit on how you're running your machine, how you boot it up, what you're using for your storage. If you boot it up with DriveWire or whatever, you'd have to do something similar. It's just you'd have to point at whatever you got your DriveWire ROM whatever slot that's coming out of. If you boot it off a floppy, you'd have to account for that. You could point to the slot 4 or whatever. And if you put your Game Master cartridge in a different slot, of course, that part of the number would change as well. So, I haven't made this to an official proposal just yet, but for now, let's take a working proposal. If you are developing for the Game Master cartridge, but you're doing so in a way where your program doesn't run from the cartridge just yet, or ever, possibly, if you just want to use a Game Master cartridge purely for sound, but for whatever reason you don't want to load off of the cartridge, why don't we propose that the proper place to put your Game Master cartridge being used just for sound is in slot 0. That seems reasonably convenient. I don't think anything else is planning to just be in slot 0. If anything, that's probably the one slot that people keep open for if they do want to throw in a game cartridge of some sort. That way, then I'm pretty sure that FF7F address, I think that's readable in your game program. You could do a load from FF7F, a load A or whatever, and then and it with F0 to preserve the contents for the whatever the cartridge ROM address is, and then set to slot 0 for your game hardware, the audio hardware, and then just write that back out. Now, of course, if you and that would probably work fine too. If you actually end up burned in a ROM, since you have to point out that ROM anyway. So no real danger of putting that in your program. So there, if you are a game developer and you want to target the GMC hardware, but you're just in development, then why don't you assume that the GMC hardware is in slot 1, which would be the value 0, and you can modify the FF7F address, and hopefully that'll save everybody some sanity. Then the only people who have to go insane are the ones who put their GMC in a different slot, I guess. Is that a perfect solution? I don't know, but for a development solution, I think that's probably pretty workable. Or, don't do it, and just whoever's doing your testing will have to know how to set up their MPIs correctly. Now, one other thing to mention, well, a couple other things really, but so the MPI, like I said, is a little bit different from just a Y cartridge or a Y cable. And like I said, not with a Y cable, all 40 pins would go to both of the connectors on the Y cable, and they'd all be basically equivalent. And that works fine as long as you don't have two cartridges both trying to use SCS or both trying to use CTS. The MPI does not do all 40 pins that way. Now, they certainly do, the voltage pins, and, they do the data lines and the address lines to all the cartridges. But there are there's 3 signals that they do not send to all the cartridges. And, of course, that's SCS and CTS, the cartridge. Again, cartridge, the CTS cartridge select, that's the ROM range, it's C000. And then SCS is spare cartridge select, that's the hardware range at FF40. But then there's a third line, and that's CART, which is really the cartridge interrupt line. That one gets switched either in hardware or software, just like the other ones. But, there's only 2 selects, so which one does it go with, right? Well, so naively, I would have thought, and I still kind of think it might have been a better idea, but since the CART is literally a hardware interrupt line, and since SCS is clearly intended as a hardware chip select, you would have thought they'd be switched together, right? Well, no. The CART line actually gets switched along with the CTS or cartridge select, which is the memory select, the ROM select line. And so, why did Tandy do that? To borrow a phrase. Now, so if you don't remember, there is another little trick that I think we've talked about before. When you're building a cartridge, if you strap, I think it's the Q clock. So there's two phases for the clocking on the 6809. One's named E, which I guess stands for like enable, and Q, which is quadrature, and they're out of phase by 90 degrees or whatever. I'm not sure it matters all that much in practice, but maybe it matters. Anyway, if you jumper the Q clock to the cart line, the interrupt line, that's how auto start works. So that's what triggers an auto start for a ROM pack. So your normal game ROM, if you plug in Clowns on Balloons or whatever, it has the Q and cart wired together, and so the boot ROM and the CoCo gets to a certain point, and it checks that the interrupt, enables the interrupt, and if that happens, then it knows, okay, well, this is an auto start ROM, and I'm just going to run from here. Given that sort of special relationship between the cart interrupt line and the ROM select for the program, I guess that's why they decided to switch cart along with CTS rather than with SCS. Is that a good idea? I don't know. I think that's kind of a mistake, because it doesn't make sense to me. If you were going to do a software select, then I guess if you software, well, I'm not even sure what would happen if you software selected, change your ROM select. Will it trigger the auto start then? I'd have to check that out. Maybe it does, in which case maybe it's more defensible. If you know, do send us some email, feedback@cococrew.org. I'd like to know. I'm probably too lazy to check the code or to set it up myself, but it might be interesting to know. But in my mind, it would make more sense for the interrupt, which is a signal from hardware on the cart coming back into the CPU. It seemed like if you wanted to switch the hardware to a different slot, that you'd want the interrupt line coming from that hardware in that other slot to be enabled on that cart line. And so it seems like they should have switched cart with the other half of the register. But, whatever, they didn't. So, just in case that's important for whatever it is you're trying to do, be aware cart switches with the CTS line. That's the ROM select, not with the SCS or that hardware select. So that's a little bit of funniness or whatever. Now, one more. All the other lines do, as far as I can tell, looking at the schematic, all those other 37 lines or whatever do pass through to all of the slots equally, and which includes the sound line, or SND, which is, of course, the line that an audio chip on a cartridge like the SN7649 on the Game Master cartridge, that's what it uses to pass sound back into the CoCo. Just like the Orchestra 90, which can use the CoCo's RF or audio signal to the TV, or the sound speech sound pack, those also use the sound line. That's fine, right? Okay. The thing is, if you're using the Game Master cartridge plugged in, but not as a regular ROM card. In other words, you're not booting off the ROM that's in the Game Master card or auto starting it. The SN76489 chip has call it a quirk if you want, but when you power it on, it immediately starts making sound. And I think this is even you can even identify this is the same sound that I want to say the BBC Micro. It's their same as their startup sound. It's, their ROM just goes and turns it off. but so if you have it plugged into your MPI, but you don't boot off the ROM that came on that Game Master cartridge, then there'll be nothing that knows that there's a chip out there making noise. So that chip will be putting noise on that sound line going back into the CoCo. Now, normally, that's not really a problem because the CoCo doesn't enable that sound input, is happening, but nobody knows about it, right? However, if you are running, so I think David Ladd first told me about this, where he was running, he had his Game Master cartridge plugged in at the same time as the Sound Speech Pack, or maybe his Orchestra 90, either way. And of course he did, because David Ladd is, the king of filling slots on the MPI, right? But if you do something like that and you're using that other cartridge, or otherwise run software that enables that sound input, you will hear that tone coming from the Game Master cartridge mixed in with whatever else is putting sound on that line, and it'll probably be unpleasant. And so in this case, just to add to our little comedy of errors trying to test Cersei's Island, that was one of our failure cases, is you could run Cersei's Island, which of course as part of its startup code does enable that input line, whether or not it's able to, which it wouldn't even know whether or not it's able to actually access the 76489, because it's basically a write-only device. And so the game would play, but there'd just be this annoying tone because that line doesn't switch. So that's one more thing, that audio line, it does not switch. It goes to all of the slots at the same time. If you do have more than one audio chip out there, and they're both, for whatever reason, trying to make audio, if that input is enabled for the CoCo's audio, then you'll hear it. So there, it's more of a warning than anything else, or if you're ever going to play around with this sort of stuff, or if you're trying to test Cersei's Island or some other game, if you haven't got your selects right, but you've got the card plugged in, it's going to be sitting there trying to pump out a single tone, and if nothing turns it off, then that's what you hear if you enable that input from the cartridge. All right, well, so don't do that. Well, make sure you get your select right, and whatever software. If your software is trying to access the 76489 and you've got all your chip selects mapped correctly, then one of the first things that your software ought to do is come on and turn off all the sound outputs on the Game Master cartridge. Preferably before it enables that sound input, and you'll be fine. But just in case you are someone who likes to keep a full MPI, and maybe you were playing with the Orchestra 90 or something earlier, and maybe not Orchestra 90, but maybe you were playing with the speech sound package earlier, and you left it generating some awful tone, but switched away to play Cersei's Island, and then you can't understand why that awful tone is overlapping with the Cersei's Island music, or vice versa. Well, that's probably the answer. All right, well, it's kind of a rambling tech segment. I hope it wasn't too much for people to follow, or at least maybe it was entertaining. Listen to me dance around, but that's pretty much it. So remember, there's two chip selects, two things to be selected. Well, there's three things really to be selected, two selections to make. They're both in the same byte, so you have to map out the byte correctly. The high 4 bits go for the ROM select, and the lower 4 bits go for the hardware select. The cartridge line, if it matters, is going to go with the ROM select, not with the hardware select. So if you do ever need to use hardware that is generating interrupts, you need to be aware of that if you're going to try to split the signals on your MPI. Again, if something is making noise on the sound input, all the slots on the MPI are going to have the equal access, shall we say, to make that noise. All right, well, I think that's probably enough for this tech segment. Hopefully everyone's still awake. Keep on CoCo in, CoCo forever. I hope everyone enjoys Tandy Assembly, and get ready for CoCo Fest in another 6 months. Linville out.
Tandy Assembly. Tandy Assembly is about Radio Shack and Tandy computers.
Tandy Assembly is about interacting.
Tandy Assembly is about people.
Tandy Assembly is about fun.
The first gathering of its kind.
Computers of the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
all Radio Shack and Tandy makes and models.
Join us. Don't miss Tandy Assembly.
In Springfield, Ohio, November 10th and 11th.
Whether you're near or far,
Tandy Assembly is for everyone.
Visit our webpage at www.tandyassembly.com.
Tandy Assembly.
Welcome back to Neil's Corner on episode 41. For this month, I'm going to review a game in honor of Chet Simpson because of his resurgence back in the CoCo community, and also, well, because it's a fantastic game. And this game is called Gold Runner 2000. It was coded back in 1997 by Chet Simpson with the help of Eric Crislow. The game was released under Chet's very own label called Media-Link Development. Gold Runner 2000 is a very ambitious game with multi-channel digitized audio and music playing at the same time during gameplay. Oh, and here's the kicker. The gameplay features horizontal and vertical scrolling. It requires a Color Computer 3 with 512K memory and either a floppy drive or a CoCo SDC to run. The game takes up 2 floppy disk images of data. It does have the option to play with a joystick or keyboard. There's kind of a neat story behind this game. It all started from a friendly challenge by Eric Crislow, who made a similar game for the more powerful MM1 computer, stating it couldn't be done on the CoCo 3. Well, Chet took his friend Eric's challenge and proved him wrong. Now what's cool, because this game came out in 1997, I had no idea it even existed. By 97, I had already moved on to the DOS PC platform, and had unfortunately sold off all my CoCo gear. So when I returned back into the CoCo world in 2005, I had discovered this gem. I downloaded it from L. Curtis Boyle's CoCo game website, and put it on 2 real floppy disks. I seriously couldn't believe what I was hearing and seeing when I booted this game up for the first time. When loading the game, you are greeted with a screen that reads, Media-Link Development proudly presents a Chet Simpson production, ... and a game Eric Crislow said couldn't be done. After reading that while waiting for the game to load from the floppy, I was like, what? And thinking, this definitely sounds cool. And then all of a sudden, bam, a digitized sampled dance track comes on. I couldn't believe I was hearing cool music coming from my CoCo. After pressing enter, it'll ask to enter disc 2. This will bring you to the main menu where you can select joystick or keyboard, warp to a level, or watch the credits. Now let me tell you, this is the most exciting credits I've ever seen on a CoCo game before. The credits have beautiful silky smooth scrolling while playing yet another digitized audio dance track. While watching the credit, Chet lists all the artists he used for audio samples in the game. His choices were right up my alley as I'm really into this type of music. I'm a huge fan of 80s and early 90s hip-hop and dance music. Now at this point, I haven't even played the game and I'm already enjoying it so much. I'm thinking to myself, now this game is so fresh and cool. Okay, on to the game. Gold Runner 2000 is based on the famous game called Lode Runner. Although this game is much more advanced than the originals and even the older CoCo 2 versions from Diecom Products. The object of this game is to collect all the gold bars on each level, while digging holes to trap guards that come after you. Once you collect all the gold bars, an extra ladder appears, which allows you to climb up to the next level. Gold Runner 2000 has 5 levels to go through, and each with their own theme clip. Chet did release a sequel to this game called Digger 2, Return of the Saint, which features a lot more levels, but due to memory restrictions, this version does not have the nice in-game music. I can definitely say Chet took this game to the next level. It's super fun to play with great use of the CoCo 3 graphic and sound capabilities. The background music and sampled sound effects as you go on playing this game are absolutely incredible. You know, sometimes I just boot this game up from time to time just to hear the amazing audio while watching the credits scroll. Well, there you have it. Another game for you to enjoy on your CoCo 3. Or if you have played it before, well, hopefully this gives you a bug to go play it again. If you don't have this game already in your collection, it can be obtained from the Color Computer Archive website or L. Curtis Boyle's CoCo game website. Alright, until next month, keep this one cranked up, pedals to the metal, and happy CoCo gaming.
Dude, you have to see this.
What is it?
It's the Proto-EEPROM CC from Prototech. I can program 2716, 2732, and 2732A EEPROMs.
So my EEPROM burner can do that.
This one has 4K of RAM so you can create and debug your RAM image before you burn your ROM.
Wow.
It's fully powered by the color computer, no wall warts or cords to get tangled. It just plugs into your cartridge slot.
Nice.
You can program the RAM or ROM directly from BASIC or assembly language.
Where can I get one?
It's just $149.95 from Prototech.
That's a bargain.
The Proto-EEPROM CC from Prototech, Boulder, Colorado.
Well, it's that time again. We have reached the end of episode 41. As usual, I'd like to give a big thanks to our host, John Linville, for staying on top and finding us all those really interesting news items each month and providing us another fantastic tech segment. You know, come to think of it, I don't think he has missed one episode without providing us at least some kind of a tech segment. Also like to thank Mike Rowan for editing and creating those awesome commercials you hear. I honestly don't know how he does it. I wish I was that creative. Also like to thank Boise Pete and Ron Klein for being a permanent active member on this podcast. Thank you also goes out to Michael Maydaniuk for giving us some of your time to record an interview with you. Sorry I couldn't make it to the recording. Last but not least, we would like to thank all of you who listen and support us each month. We appreciate your feedback and like hearing from you. Until next month, retro forever and happy CoCo.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo. 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 CoCo.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway? It's a blast from the past.